Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt. I'm chairing today's panel. Joining me on the panel via Zoom are Adila Del Oro and Richard Whitbread. Our administrative personnel today is Phoebe Graywood, and our assessor is Clayton Deitchen. We'll be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by council and is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony, followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 3 through 8 on our docket today. Ms. Graywood, please affirm the assessor's and applicant's testimony.
Mr. Deitchen, please state your full name.
Clayton Deitchen.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Rack, can you state your full name? Sorry, you're muted, Mr. Rack.
Lyle Rock.
Do you affirm the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Mr. Rack, we can't hear you very well. I don't know if you can move your speaker closer to you.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you. Before we begin, are there any preliminary issues that need to be discussed?
No, I don't think so.
None? Okay, thank you. Then we will begin with item number 3 on our agenda, which is file number 24-334. So Mr. Deitchen, when you're ready, please.
Okay, file number 24-334. Roll number is 13052778000. Roll year is 2025. Assessed value is at $1,080,000, and it's a 60T property. It is surface parking, built in 1960. Total area is 12,000 square feet. Page 2 is just some pictures of the lot, an overhead, and a street view. Page 3 is another overhead view of the parking lot. Page 4 is the zoning for the parking lot. It's downtown living sector, zoning D. Page 5, we are looking at this property on land only because the highest and best use is determined that land is the highest and best use. So at the 12,000 square feet, it comes to a rate of $90 a square foot, brings a value to $1,080,000. Page 6 is the land sale comparables for this property. You can see it ranges from 94.96 all the way up to 142.28. So the subject property falls below this range. The mean is 119.06 with the median at 120.22. And you can see that they're all downtown properties, land sales that have sold within the past several years. Continuing on is just the pictures of all these comparable properties on page 7 all the way through to page 21. Page 22 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. It's kind of hard to read. Page 23 and forward are the mailers. So I just posted these mailers just to show what is reported, and you can see that the NOIs actually has been dropping over the past few years because I posted in the mailers for 22, 21, 2020. So yeah, the income's actually dropping over the past few years. So it kind of further supports that the highest and best use should be land only, along with that it states on the right side of page 22 or page 23 that the vacancy is 30%. Along with on page 24, you can see that it's hard to read, but the monthly rates kind of range all over the place from I think about $65 all the way to $150. So it's kind of all over the map for monthly rates as well. Continuing on, these are all the mailers for 22 to 2020. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rack, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, I do. So the subject property would be on the west side of Main Street, correct?
I believe so. I'd have to double check though.
And all your comparables are on the east side of Main Street, correct?
Again, I'm not 100% sure the exact location. I know they're all downtown.
Would you agree that your comparables, I mean, you have them on Donald, you've got 3 on Bannatyne. Would you not agree that those are all better locations in the subject property since they're closer to downtown?
I wouldn't agree to
Like
that.
closer
No.
Yeah, those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Whitbread, questions?
No, I have none, thank you.
Ms. Del Oro?
I have none, thank you.
I have some questions. First of all, how long has this been used as a parking lot?
That I'm not 100% sure of.
Okay. On your comparable properties, has there been any development on those properties subsequently?
After they sold, I'm not too sure.
Okay. For this property, has there been any marketing attempts that you're aware of?
Marketing in regards to
Trying to sell this property for
not
development
that
purposes or whatever?
no, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And in the previous assessment, was it also valued by the land valuation method?
I'm not too sure. I would have to double check that if you would like me to.
Yes, please.
Okay. It'll take this it's a little slow, so it'll give me a few minutes here. sorry. Yeah, it looks like in 2023 it was land only as well.
Okay, so this is not a change in methodology. It's consistent with previous years.
That's what it looks like. It.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Deitchen. Mr. Ruck.
Mind if I ask them? Yeah, could I
Yeah,
ask them a couple more?
we can't hear you, Mr. Ruck. So again, sorry. Could speak up.
Do you mind if I ask them a couple more questions?
Okay, sure.
Yeah, on all your comparables, I looked at them. They're all paved lots, correct?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
All your comparables, they're basically all paved lots.
I'm not too sure. I mean, looking at the pictures, potentially, I'm not 100% sure. Looks like comparable one Hargrave is like grass. I don't know. But without going through each one, I'm not 100% sure which ones are and which ones aren't.
Okay, I looked at them. They are all paved. Do you know
Even
if they,
one?
You have another question, Mr. Ruck?
yes, do your comparables have plugs for plugging the cars in the wintertime?
Again, I'm not too sure.
That's all my questions.
Thank you. Your evidence now, please.
Okay, on page 1, you'll see a picture of the lot. He does offer evening parking. There are no people that are renting spots at the evening at this time, and there never has been. There's no ticket machine, so you can't basically, if you parked in there at night, you're basically parking for free. It's a gravel lot, and there are no plugs. So if you look at page 2, you'll see that the value of the property has gone up 69% in 2 years, which I think is excessive. You'll see that there's a vacancy in this lot from 2019 to 2022, ranging between 12 and 14, between 28 and 33%. The stalls vacant are between 12 and 14 stalls a year. It's a gravel lot, and there's no electrical plugs. The highest rent that the building has, or the lot has achieved, as the assessor states, there's multiple rates. There are some low rates because they're discounted, because some of those people parking there are actually tenants in the owner's buildings. But basically the highest rates that they're getting is about $120 a stall. So I've adjusted management from 1,441 to 3,024, and that's based on a lot that is full at 5% gross. So you're getting, so basically my workup is 42 stalls at $120. There's insurance, property management, hydro, snow removal and repairs, and the property taxes. So we've got a total expenses of $23,303. You're getting a net operating income of $37,177. So the net operating per stall is $73.76. The expenses are basically 61%. And basically below you'll see from another appeal I had, or basically from the assessor's brief in 2025, you can see that at a net operating per stall is $73.76. On the right-hand column, you'll see that falls in line with the assessor's comparables for another property, downtown, on Bannatyne, Waterfront, and Lombard, where you're getting a net operating income of at the lowest of $20.84. You're getting $50.94. So it falls in with the range of what's downtown, so that's acceptable. You're seeing expenses at 61%. So if you're looking at expense ratio, you'll see that the mean is 56, the median is 54%. So for this particular parking lot, the expenses are falling in at pretty close to that. And you're getting McDermott at 62%, Waterfront is 77%, Mill Street is 75%. So for where the parking lot is located, it's on the other side of Main Street. as far as the assessor's comparables are, and you basically see that the net operating income at the bottom, page 3, is 37,177. Cap rate at 5%, and you're getting a total valuation of 743,540. So basically, the increase for 2025 would be 638 to 743. So I'm looking for a reduction at 743. And you'll see below page 4 is basically shows a vacancy of on page 6 shows a vacancy of 30% on 42 stalls. And if you go below, you'll see that on page 7, see the rates, that there's 2 rates at 120. So I'm using $120 per square foot. There's one at 150, which is an outlier. So I'm using basically $120 per square foot gross. And there's some other income and expense mailers going back to 2019 that shows the vacancy. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Deitchen, do you have questions for Mr. Rack?
Yeah, just a couple. So, sorry, there are some lots or some stalls that are renting at $150 a stall per month?
There's only one.
Okay. So, if this property is sold, wouldn't the purchaser want to use the max potential monthly per stall rate at 150?
Oh, no, they wouldn't base it on the
Mr.
maximum
Deitchen,
stall rate. I mean, they
You are breaking up on our end. You're freezing and we can't. Pardon
Uh-oh.
me?
I think my internet's cutting
Yeah,
out here. Can you hear me now?
That's better, yeah,
Okay, yeah, sorry, something was cutting out there.
yeah. Okay, so could you repeat what you were saying, please?
I guess my question was, if there's $150 per month stall, and if this property sold, wouldn't the potential or the buyer want to rent it at the highest potential for this lot?
Well, that's what the owner's trying to do, and you'll see that there's a vacancy of 30% over the last 5 years. So obviously, $150 is an outlier, and the next to that is 120. So anybody looking to buy the property knows that basically there's a 30% vacancy. So there's 14 stalls have been vacant for in basically the last 4 years. So you're not going to purchase that property thinking that you're going to get $150 a stall when you only have one rented at that, and you've got 14 vacant for the last 4 years. That wouldn't make any sense.
Okay, but looking at your comparables on page 3, it looks like these ones are renting for over 200. So it seems like the downtown area can get these kind of rates. Can they not?
Well, your comparables on the other side of Main Street, close to Waterfront Drive, close to the Richardson Building.
I'm talking about your comparables.
You know, well, I don't have any comparables.
Where are
The
these comparables?
The page 3 comparables are to show that basically, I'm not using comparables, I'm using site specific. I have that chart there to show that the expenses that the property at 61% falls in line with other properties. You've got McDermott at 62%, you've got Waterfront Drive at 77%, you have Mill Street at 75%. So this property has 61% expenses, which falls in line. You also have the net operating income of $73.76, where you've got McDermott, which is on the other side of Main Street at $50.94. You've got Waterfront Drive, which is a better location at $41.47. You've got Mill Street at $21.84. You've got 125 Lombard, which is across from the Richardson Building, and they're only getting $56.61. So that's what that chart is about. I never made any reference to those as comparable properties for the rates.
Well, it says comparable properties right in your brief, though.
Well, I've explained to you, and the board is why that chart is there.
Okay. I mean, my point is, if this sold, the new owner would try to sell it probably at least for $150. Running it through your numbers, $150 per stall comes out to a total value of $1,046,000. So it's close to what we have. I'm just.
Well, that's
like,
your opinion. That's your opinion on the property. The facts are that he's got 14 stalls that have been vacant for 4 years.
Okay.
So
then
he isn't getting 150. He's getting the next up to 150 is 120, which I'm going to the high side. After that, there's actual market rents at 100 a stall, and those are
Mhm.
legitimate arm's length transactions.
So then would you agree that the highest and best use for this property is vacant land then?
Well, presently, the highest and best use is a parking lot.
Well, you're saying that it's not making money, it's not making a lot of money, it's got a lot of vacancy and issues like that, so then maybe it is the best at vacant land.
Well, if it was vacant land, the owner wouldn't have any income on it, and basically he'd be paying taxes.
Well, if they sold
an
it, they
empty
can make
property.
income.
Well, it's not for sale. I mean, you're
Well,
bringing
but
up
that's not how
hypothetical
highest and
ideas
best.
here.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Deitchen. Ms. Del Oro, do you have questions for the applicant?
I don't have any questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
And I have none, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Rack, I'm going to pursue this a little bit more. You said you do not agree that the highest and best use is land. So can you please, or valuation on the basis of land, can you tell us why? I'm going to ask that again.
Well, it all depends on what you mean. Vacant land. Are you saying that the highest and best use is to keep it as vacant land and not
No,
use
I'm
it
not
as a
saying
parking
that.
lot?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying the assessors used one approach. You've used another one. You've valued this as a parking lot. The assessor has used from a land valuation approach. Why isn't the land valuation approach appropriate in your view?
Well, in my view, the location of that property is not as advantageous as the other comparables the assessor has, which is closer to Portage and Main on the other side of Main Street. This is the greatest location for a property. So presently, the highest and best use would be a parking lot.
Has the owner attempted to sell it?
No, the owner is using it as a parking lot, and that's how it's going to maintain. It's going to be used as a parking lot because for him, the lower rate stalls are tenants that he has on buildings that are, a half a block away from the subject property.
Has it always been a parking lot?
As far as I know, I can't tell you forever. There could have been a building on there back in the 30s. I have no idea, but he's had that property. Oh, when I worked at the assessment department, 15 years ago, it was still a parking lot back then. So I don't know for sure if there's ever a building on there. I would assume at some point there was a building there, like decades and decades ago, but it's been a parking lot. I would imagine for at least 20 years or more.
Okay, so while you say that you're bringing in comparables from a completely different hearing, and are you relying on this for rates or for expenses, or what are you doing? Or just to
Those
see?
comparables,
Go ahead.
those comparables, I'm not using those comparables. What I'm showing from that chart is what a basically stabilized net operating income per stall per month is for those comparables, and what the expense ratio is for those comparables. Because you're getting, like, for example, if you look at number 1 on McDermott, which is a better location, the net operating income per month is $50.94. The subject property is $74.76. So even though 211 McDermott is a better location, the subject property is getting almost $25 more per stall. So I'm just showing that that my valuation using the actual income from the property is quite reasonable. And then you're getting Waterfront Drive. Well, Waterfront Drive is a much better location than the subject property, and it's only getting $41.47 per stall.
And there's also only
You got
4 of them. There's only 4.
Well, it's still, I'm just showing basically the operating expenses. Like basically in Lombard, 125 Lombard, well, that's opposite the Richardson building. I mean, that's a pretty good location, and it has, Lombard has 106 stalls, and it's only making $56.61. So, I mean, I put the whole chart in here. I mean, yes, there's only 4 stalls on Waterfront Drive, but if I mean, Lombard is a much better location than the subject property. It's basically it's only making 56.61 per stall, and I'm using 73.76. So that's what that chart's for, is to show the operating expenses. And you can see the operating expenses for some of the properties like Mill Street and basically McDermott with 28 stalls is 62%, and the expenses for the property are only 61%. So when you're looking at the net operating income for the property and the expenses, it falls in line with other properties. So it's reasonable. To me, it's reasonable compared to other marketable properties.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Rack, I understand you have rebuttal evidence?
Not for this property,
Not for this property? Okay, thank you.
no.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Deitchen, would you like to do summation?
Yeah, I guess just quick. I think it's clear that the highest and best use for this property is vacant land and is supported by our comparables. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes item number 3. Okay, item number 4 is file number 24-343, 2026 Pembina Highway. So Mr. Deitchen, when you're ready, please.
Okay. File number 24-343, roll number 0305392000. Address is 2026 Pembina Highway. Roll years 2025. Assessed values at $2,502,000. Is a 60T property. It's a vehicle service related property. It's 2 buildings, 1 story high, built in 1992. Land area is 40,231, with the gross floor area being at 9,235. Page 2 is just the overhead view of the property along with the street view, so you can see it's a super loop. And then page 3 is another picture of the building in the back. You can see that does like tires and brakes and such back there, with the front building being the oil center, I believe. Page 4 is just the map of where the property is in the city. Page 5 is the zoning for the property at C3 Commercial Corridor. Page 7 is the income breakdown. So you can see there's 2 premises for the 2 buildings. First one being at 6,163 at a rate of 2082. The second building being at 1,536 square feet at a rate of 2163. Total leasable areas at 7,699. Brings the potential rent to 161,538 with vacancy of 2%. Brings the effective gross income to 158,307. Expenses are at 3%, shortfalls at $6 per square foot. Brings the NOI to 152,634. And the cap's at 6.10%, brings the value to $2,502,000. Page 8 is just another breakdown of the income stream. And then page 9 is the rent comparables for the property. So these are franchise type comparables like Superlube. So you can see they range from $16 all the way up to $31.85 with an average of $22.27. Weighted average at $21.13 and a median at $21. Excuse me. So you can see that the subject falls right in line with at the rate of $20.82 and $21.63. Continue on, this is the cap rate table showing the city of Winnipeg cap rates, the 20th to 80th percentile for office, industrial, retail, multifamily, and how they compared to Collier's, CBRE, and Cushman and Wakefield. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And page 12 and 13 is the mailer for the subject property. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rack, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, I do. So on page 10, you have the cap rates.
Mhm.
So what type of property would you use to apply a cap rate to a service garage? Because it doesn't seem like there's anything in that chart that says service
There
garage.
isn't, and neither does Collier, CBRE, or Cushman and Wakefield have that. This is just to show that our cap rates for these properties fall in line with the market rates and the Collier, CBRE, Cushman and Wakefield. So it doesn't
But
necessarily
there are
fall
no
in the
cap rates. But as you stated, there are no cap rates for service garages.
I mean, there's cap rates that are just not stated in here because there's not enough. I'm assuming there's not enough sales to derive a cap rate table for them. I'm not too sure exactly though.
Okay, so on your comparisons on page 9,
Mhm.
number 2, 2735 Pembina, the lease ended in, I guess, August 31st, 2021.
Yeah,
So did they sign another lease in 2021?
I believe it was actually demolished after that. I could be wrong about that, but I couldn't find a new lease for it. No.
Okay, so comparison 5 on St. Anne's, it's
Mhm.
at 3185
Mhm.
square foot. So that's basically double the rate of comparable 1. It's basically $10.85 higher than comparable 3, and
Mhm.
$9.85 higher than comparable 4. Do you have any reason why that particular rent is so high? Could it be a gross lease?
No, I believe it's probably due to the size, age, location. I'm not sure exactly why, but these wouldn't be gross leases. They're net rates.
So are all your comparables basically single, are the only buildings on the property as same as the subject property?
I'm not too sure. I'd have to double check that.
Well, you put these comparables in, so you didn't check before you put the comparables in your brief whether or not they were standalone properties?
I didn't make this table, but I could double check those for you. I didn't think it would be relevant how many buildings were on the property. You can see one that they're bigger. Sorry.
So you didn't make this table is what you're saying?
I did not make this table.
So you didn't pick out these comparables, use these from someone else?
I mean, we all work as a group and we create comparables for different different property types, and we use them.
So you really didn't investigate whether these comparables are actually comparable to subject properties from what you're saying?
No, I did because I looked at our franchise type properties. I can tell you what they are, like what kind of properties they are.
But
Like
right
they're
now
Fountain
you don't
Tire,
know if
Midas Auto, Fountain Tire, Boyd Auto Body, and Mr. Lube.
Okay, well, you've answered my question. But the main thing I wanted to know is whether or not you knew about these properties, that you investigated them, and from your answer, it sounds like you haven't. So those are my questions.
I have though. I've looked. Okay.
Well, I asked you if all these properties are the single building on a single piece of land, and you don't know.
I didn't think that would be
have to
relevant
look.
information. I could look right now. I'm looking
Okay,
at 20
he's-
Lakewood.
he's-
It's 3 buildings. So does that
Mr.
help?
Mr. Rack, the assessor has answered to the best of his ability. Can you just move on to your next question, please?
Yeah, that's all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, do you have questions for the assessor?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro?
It was asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question on your page 7, on your income stream,
Mhm.
the premises there, are they main floor premises?
Yeah, those are main floor premises.
Okay, so one of them isn't the pit
No,
underneath?
no, no.
Okay. So, they're all main floor, okay. That was my big question. What about the pit? Is that not part of this? Is it included within these rents somewhere? As part of
Uh,
the,
we actually did a pit cleanup. I'm not sure if this one was one of them, but we removed the pit areas from all these kind of buildings that we had on there.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm pretty sure this was one of them.
So the pit's not included, this is just
No.
main floor premises, okay, I just needed that clarification on that. Thank you very much, that's my only question, thank you for clarifying. Mr. Rack,
Thank you. So page 1, you'll see a picture of the building. Lube centers in the front and the garage is in the back. And you'll see that the unleasable basement space where the pits are, which the assessor stated has been removed from the assessments of these types of properties. It's owner occupied, so you're getting basically 7,704 square feet for the main, and the storage is 2,515 square feet. If you go down past the valuation, you'll see pictures of the subject property. You'll see in the left-hand top picture, the stairs. You can see the stairs in the first opening to your right. Those stairs are in the back of the shop. Picture beside that with the oil tank, because that's the second floor mezz area. You see it's quite industrial looking. And on the bottom page to your left is the mezzanine is actually open to the garage area. So any kind of fumes from the garage would go up into that mezz space. And on the right, you'll see that there's just some document storage. So these are some comparables from assessor's briefs in 2025. You're getting 1315 Henderson Tony's. You're getting number 2 is 720 Nairn Avenue. You can see that there's 4 doors on the right. And number 4 is 340 Pembina Highway. Then you get 5, 6, and 7. There's 331, 333, and 3341 Portage that are all in the same building. And then on the bottom, you're getting 123 Fort Street. And on the bottom, you're getting number 9 is 960 Pembina. Basically, the Fort Street and the Pembina Highway one are from Stevenson's briefs. So you'll see there's a table there that's giving 9 comparables. And basically, out of those 9 comparables, we're getting an average rate of $15.88 a square foot. And then if you actually add in the assessor's comparable on Arlington Street, you're getting at $16. That's a total of 10 comparables at around basically $16 a square foot. Now, when you're looking at number 5, 6, and 7, 331 Portage, 3333 Portage, and 3341 Portage, they're all in the same building complex. But you're getting a rate of 1403, 1638, and 2074. Well, the difference is $6. You can surmise that probably the 2074 is a semi-gross lease or difference in the same complex. There's got to be something going on with those leases, but I don't know, so I kept that rent in there. So for this purpose, we've got 10 comparables, basically including the assessors. And so I'm basically using $16.50 for the main floor. And that's basically an average of the 3 comps of the middle comp on Portage Avenue, which is close to the subject. And for the storage mezzanine space, which is not an office space, it's typically storage space is half the rate of the main floor. So I'm using $8.25 for the mezzanine storage So you're getting at main floor at 1650, the mezz at 825. I'm getting a potential income of 147,865. And you run that through the city's parameters, you're getting a total value of 2,152,000. And that's my presentation.
Okay, before you go forward, Mr. Rack, unless I'm looking at the wrong one, which I hope I'm not, you noted that your value here is 1,905,000. So are you looking at a different document than we are?
Are we doing 3,400 Portage?
No, we're doing 2026 Pembina Highway.
Ah. Sorry. My mistake. I apologize.
You want to start again on your 2026 Pembina?
Okay, well, we've looked at okay, I'll start again. Page 1. I won't go through the pictures. We know what it's all about. So on page 2, you'll see there's a 35% increase. The comparables are the same. So if we go through the comparables, go right down to page 3. So it's basically the same thing as 1588. The assessor's comparables at McPhillips is $16. And I've talked about the Portage Avenue as far as one might be a semi-gross. So now we're coming up to 7,699 square feet at $16, applying the city's parameters. We get 1,905,000. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Okay, Mr. Deitchen, do you have questions for Mr. Ruck?
Just a few. Sorry. Would you consider the subject property a franchise type service garage?
Well, it's owner occupied. It's not a franchise. He actually owns a business.
Well, would you consider the a large franchise?
No, Mr. Lube is not a large franchise. He just owns the ones in Winnipeg, as far as I know.
This is a Super Lube, isn't it?
Sorry, Super Lube.
Okay, so there are multiple Super Lubes though in Winnipeg.
Yes, he owns them all.
Okay. Would you?
It's a Winnipeg-based business that he started.
Okay. Would you? So I was looking at comparables. It looks like comparables 1, 2, 5, 6, and 7 are all more mom and pop type run operations. Is that correct?
Well, they're probably. I don't know if they're. Well, one of them at the end is Mr. Transmission, which would be kind of like a franchise. The other two could be just Winnipeg-based.
Okay, and then 1 and 2 probably are just mom and pop ones too. Then, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
It wouldn't make any difference who runs the property. It's what it rents for. I mean, if you look at number 1, Tony's, it's at $18.33 a square foot, which is higher than the Goodyear or the Fountain Tire.
Okay, that wasn't my question. So looking at comparables on page 3, it says assessor comparables 2025. Where did these come from exactly?
They came from briefs that basically the assessor had on similar type properties. They came from the Board of Revision.
From this cycle?
That's correct.
I don't know.
You can request you can request any brief you want for a fee from the Board of Revision, and these came from an assessor's briefs on another docket.
Okay. And then you got TGS Realty comparables. Do you have any comparables that you found yourself?
No, I don't.
Okay. It looks like comparable 8 is a 10-year lease. Is that correct?
It was 10-year lease with step-ups.
Okay, do you know what the
I
step
don't
up
know
is?
when the last,
Okay.
no, I don't want to know when the last step-up was.
So $13 might have been like the first step in 2018, possibly?
I don't know.
Okay, so we don't know for sure, okay. And then comparable 9, do you know when this, the lease ended? Like the exact date?
No, not the exact date in 2023. I don't have that information.
Okay. If I told you February 28th, 2023, would you know one way or the other?
Unless you could have supplied that information by a rebuttal brief. Otherwise, it's just hearsay. Although
Okay.
you did supply a lease that ended in 2021.
No, okay. I'm just pointing out what I'm seeing because you didn't put end dates on there, so I thought it was interesting. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Del Oro, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
Yes. So I understand that this property comprises two premises or two buildings. The larger one is the automotive and the smaller is the lube station, an oil change station. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And for your evidence, then, you've included the pit at the 1536 square foot building. That pit is included in your assessment. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Oh, can you explain?
Well, okay, if you go to page 1,
Yeah.
okay, you'll see the commercial building summary.
Yeah.
Okay, so building 1 is 1536 square feet in the basement,
Yep.
1536 square feet on the main floor. But above grade, without the basement, on the, it says above grade area, it's 1536. Building 2 is 6163. The total of 7699. So the pit is not in there.
So the building is actually larger than 7699? Or bear with me just for a moment. Are we suggesting that the assessor has also excluded the pit from his total?
That's correct. For this going, actually in 2023 assessment year, the department removed the pit areas on all these types of buildings. I argued for years that the pit shouldn't be included, and finally the department removed the pit. So there's no pit in this valuation. It's just 1,536 square feet for the Loop Center and 6,163 square feet for the actual service garage, for a total of 7699, which is what I used in my valuation.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, may I redirect a question to the assessor?
Sure.
So I didn't want to go through this until I had heard Mr. Rack's evidence, Clayton. Are you confirming what he's saying? You've excluded the pit?
That's correct.
Thank you. No further questions, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I don't think I have any questions, other than Mr. Rack, you're relying on assessor comparables that were presented at another hearing for a different property, that we don't have information on, nor should we, for these rents, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
These are supplied at another hearing, and if these numbers were incorrect, the assessor could have looked at all these comparables, which he has obviously on his computer, which he says he collaborates with other assessors, and he could have supplied a rebuttal brief if these were wrong. If you want, I can tell you exactly what hearing these came from, if you wanted to give me a few moments.
No, we don't. This is a brand new hearing on this property. We're not going into assessments or hearings related to other properties. So that part is irrelevant. You've provided these assessor comparables as part of your evidence. He didn't provide these as his evidence. So I'm just trying to wrap my brain around that part. And so, you know, it's up to you to explain these comparables, not him. He didn't bring them. They might be for a different purpose. We don't know that. And that's okay.
Well, they were for a service garage hearing. I mean, they're comparables. They're basically rents of similar type properties, garages.
Okay, so we've heard that these are comparables for this property then. This is a super lube. And you've brought pictures of the other ones, have you? These are pictures or no, they're not of these ones. So what is 1315 Henderson? What kind of property is that? Or who owns it or what is it?
The pictures in my brief are pictures of the comparables.
Okay,
So
so
if you go, so if you go to bottom of page 2, you'll see 1315 Henderson Highway is Tony's. There's a picture of it. And then the second picture in Nairn is the second comparable. Number 3 is 715 Nairn, which is the third comparable, which is Midas. Fourth comparable is Kel Tire on Pembina. And then you get the 3 on Portage Avenue. And then number 8 is Fort, and number 9 is 960 Pembina, which is Fountain Tire. So those are the comparables that I've used, 1 through 9. Those pictures are of those comparables.
So would you say that the best comparables on these that would be more franchise type properties are 3, 4, 8, and 9? I'm just looking at the names. I'm not looking at, you know, just because yeah. It's a good year, Fountain
Well, I
Tire.
Well, it's hard to say. Buildings rent for what they rent for. I mean, who's occupying the space, I think, is immaterial. I mean, spaces, I mean, obviously 3 on Nairn, that's the same type of building. Yes, I would agree with that. 4 on Pembina Highway would be the same type of building. 8 would be the same type of building, and 9 would be the same type of building.
Okay,
As far as the looks of the building and the construction.
okay.
I think also, Madam Chair, 567 is a franchise. Across Western Canada.
Yeah.
East as
I'm
far
having
as-
a little bit of problems, Mr. Rack, just following which one is which because on your description, 1-1315 Henderson Highway is on page 2 at the bottom. But it really relates to the one on page 3. So like I'm trying anyway, I'm just having a little bit of trouble figuring out which one. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Rack, you do have rebuttal, you indicated, right?
Yes, I do.
And is this rebuttal evidence, does it apply to the remainder of the docket as well?
Yeah, basically that covers all the service garages.
Okay, so it will apply for item 5, 6, 7, 8 in addition to item 4?
That's correct. I mean, I could go through it once and then you could just basically just submit it for each as evidence for each.
Yeah, we will have to just note it under each item, just so you're aware of that. But you don't have to go into great detail about it for the remainder of the items. So just give us a minute to get that in our hands. We don't quite have it yet. Okay, does everybody have it now?
I'm still looking for it.
It's
Yeah.
under item 4.
Now let me refresh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Rack.
Thank you. So on page 1, you'll see that the comparables at the top chart there are for 2025 that the assessors used. Below that are the same comparables for 2023 that the assessors have been using. So if you just scroll down a little bit, you'll see that there's a heading that says lease increases. So see, the first one, McPhillips, went from $15.50 in 2021 to 2023 to $16. So the rent increase when the lease was re-signed was 50 cents. Vermilion went from $20.50 to $21, and that increase on the new lease was 50 cents. The Lakewood went from $20 to $22. So the increase was $2. This all seemed quite reasonable. $2 one is the highest. But if you look at the St. Anne's, it went from $23.25 to $31.85. That's an $8.60 increase per square foot. Now, there's something wrong with that. Something is going on with that lease. I mean, when you're looking at the 50-cent increase and an $8.60 increase. So basically, St. Anne's is the highest lease for a service garage in the city by far. And for that reason alone, it should be ignored. It must be a gross or semi-gross lease. There's something going on with that lease. It's actually $15.85 higher than McPhillips. It's $10.85 higher than Vermilion and $9.85 higher than Lakewood. Now that's an extremely high lease, especially when you're looking at McPhillips at $15.85. So I'm assuming that that's probably a semi-gross or probably for sure a gross lease. There's something going on with that lease. So you look at the assessor's comparison one at $16, it's Fountain Tire. Very, similar to the subject property. So comparison 2, now I don't know why the assessor used it because the lease ends in 2020, and that's Midas. Now that was on the same property behind Midas. You can see that was a Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, 2735 Pembina. So it could be a pad lease. We don't know. The owner of the entire property, because I don't think the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority owns that building. They could, but I don't think they do. So the owner that owns all that property could have built that Midas. If you're looking at comparison 2, we don't know who basically built that Midas, and we don't know anything about that lease. So if you scroll down to page 4, you'll see that they've demolished that building and they're building an apartment block. So there's many questions about this property we don't know. So the question would be like, would an owner sign a pad lease where the landowner at the end of their lease could have the owner, basically demolish Midas, losing the building value and the business value. So was Midas owned by the property owner and then the lease was a book rent, or did he rent it out to a second party? Was the property sold to a new owner who demolished the building to construct the apartment? If you own the Midas, you'd have to be compensated extremely high because you'd lose your income and you'd lose the value of the building. The building's got to be worth $1 million on its own. So we don't know anything about that. To me, there's something going on there. So if you look at keep going down, you'll see comparison 3 and 4. Now the assessor stated that he didn't know if these were freestanding buildings on their own property, single buildings. And it's obviously he didn't check into it. And there's a reason why those rents are so high. So basically 107 Vermilion Road and 20 Lakewood Road are both in the Southdale Shopping Center. So that's why the leases are higher. shopping center leases are always higher than standalone because you get the amenities of the shopping center. I mean, people are driving to the shopping center, looking at other, going to shop at other locations, and they go by and they see, hey, there's a Fountain Tire there. We could drop our car off and go shop somewhere and pick it up when it's done. So there's amenities to be had, and basically, if you're in a shopping center and you're a CRU and a commercial retail unit standalone, you're going to pay higher rent. Definitely going to pay higher rent. So if you scroll down, you'll see a satellite picture of the shopping center. It's a huge shopping center. So again, any property building in a shopping center is going to pay higher rent. Now, 20 Lakewood Boulevard property is Boyd Auto Body. No, Boyd Auto Body is not a service garage. It's a body shop. They don't do any servicing of cars. They repair damaged cars. So that's why you'll see Boyd Auto Body doesn't have multiple doors in the front. It only has one. Because when a car goes into Boyd, it doesn't come out for, it could be in there for a week or three or 4 days. They don't do any servicing in a body shop because oil and oil products are hazardous to paint. They contaminate paint. So there's no service going in that. So that's not a service garage. So both comparisons are in the shopping mall. One is not a service garage, and both are not comparable to the subject property due to the location in a shopping mall. So if you scroll down to the next page, you see comparison 5. So comparison 5 is Mr. Lube. It had an increase of $8.60 per square foot, and that doesn't look right. So you can see pictures of Mr. Lube, and Mr. Lube is actually on the same property as Midas. So could Mr. Lube be owned by Midas, then they rent it out to a second party who basically rents out a Midas store or a Mr. Lube with all the equipment and the franchise, etc.? We don't know. So if you keep scrolling down, you'll see an aerial view of Mr. Lube and Midas. They're on the same property. So we don't know. Could it be a pad lease, gross lease, semi-gross lease? Is it book rent? So the extremely high rent indicates it's not a net lease compared to a service garage's leases in the city. The owner of Midas Muffler could own Mr. Lube, could be a book rent. As I said before, another possibility is the owner of Mr. Lube rents the building, which includes all the equipment and franchises that amenities that go with that, which would explain the extremely high rent. And that's because when Mr. Lubes are built, they are owner occupied. Mr. Lube doesn't build one of those and then rent it out. You have to own it. It's a franchise. So page 10 is basically showing, this is from the Mr. Lube's website, and it basically talks about Mr. Lube. On page 11, this is from November 17th, 2010, and basically it's an article about Mr. Lube selling off 23 corporate-owned stores. So they did own stores at one time and operate themselves. They've got out of that business. They've sold all their stores. I think they just have one in their in Alberta that they maintain. Otherwise, all stores are owner occupied. So if you go to page 12, this is basically from the Mr. Lube website. So it talks about basically you want a Mr. Lube, you basically have to purchase it. At the bottom, there's a franchise fee of $50,000. You need a minimum of $1.5 to $2 million to build a Mr. Lube. So they're owner occupied. And because they're owner occupied, that rent from Mr. Lube is not a rental rate. It's got to be a book rent. Or like I said before, it could be that the owner is renting it out to a second party, a complete Mr. Lube with all the advertising that goes with it, etc. So if you go to page 13, basically conclusion is basically the first one, Comp 1 at 1064 McPhillips. It was demolished in 2021, and I believe the lease is not relevant for April 1st, 2023. I think the only reason why the assessor included it was because it was $20.50. And I think that rent should be ignored because we don't know what was going on about that. That's probably an owner-occupied situation, and that was a book rent. Comparison number 3 and 4 are located in the shopping center, which the subject property is not located in the shopping center, so those should be ignored. Comparison number 5 on St. Anne's is definitely an owner occupied, so that's not a market rent. And it's the highest service garage rent in the city, so that's got a, I mean, just statistically speaking, you should throw out a high one like that. It's higher by $9.85 and $10.85 than basically Vermilion and Lakewood, which are in a shopping center. Like, it doesn't make any sense. So basically, the only comparison that's relevant is the one on McPhillips. So there are many market rents the assessor could have looked at to determine if the computer model was accurate. And that's shown by the Arlington. This chart down here is with all the comparables from the assessor is from his Arlington brief. And you'll see there's 10 comparables. And all those 10 comparables come up with a weighted average of 1246 or an average of 1505. So there's lots of comparables. In 2023, I had a total of probably about 35 garage rents going from all the getting dockets from the board of revision. So there are an extreme number of rents that he could have put in. So I'm thinking that the assessor's basically choosing the highest rents he could to basically defend the computer model. And if we're looking at on page 14, 5, 6, and 7 at Portage Avenue, there's 2 lower rents that the assessor did not include at that location at 1403 and 1638. And in those comparables in the above chart for Arlington, there's one there that's basically a Domo station, and that one should be removed. So if we remove that from all those comparables, you're getting 1375 as average rent. So basically, in conclusion, it's obvious that the assessor just chose, or their colleagues put together these 4 highest rents to support the computer model of over $20 a square foot. And I don't believe that's actually market rent. You're looking at the chart at page 14 when there's lots of rents below that. And that's my rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Dayton, do you have questions on the rebuttal evidence?
I just saw this now, so I'm trying to gather some information here. My thoughts. I guess page 2. It looks like this is an assumption that St. Anne's is a gross rent. Do you have any INEs to support this, to show this?
No, I don't.
Okay, so you don't know for sure.
One.
Right, so that's just a guess.
I'm looking at the rents, and basically it doesn't make any sense that St. Anne's is $16 higher than McPhillips. If McPhillips is a true market rent at $16,
Well,
St.
it could
Anne's
be.
at $16 higher. It's basically, there's something going on there. Like, it's got to be a semi-gross or a gross rent to be that high.
But
plus,
we don't know if that's
Vermilion,
correct.
I'm answering your question. Vermilion is $10.85 higher, and Lakewood is $9.85 higher. Like, that's an extreme amount higher, which if I was looking at this, you know, basically that would jump out to me at $31.85, and I would question, what is that all about? Why is it so high?
Mm-hmm. So my question is that a guess, yes or no?
So high. What's that?
Okay, let's, Mr. Dayton, can you re-ask your question?
My question was, is it a guess that St. Anne's is a semi or gross rent? Yes or no?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And there's no mailers in your rebuttal or anywhere to support this guess? Yes or no?
I have no evidence. It's just my gut feeling of doing this for 35 or 36 years and working at the assessment department for 25 years, that seems extreme and on a line. And that I don't believe that it's a regular rent, because, let me finish, St. Anne's is owner occupied. It's a Mr. Loop. So it's an owner occupied building. It was built by someone to operate it. So if it's $31.85 a square foot and he owns it, that's a book rent, or he has leased it out to someone as a Mr. Loop turnkey, which comes with all the amenities of being a franchise. You get advertising on TV. So basically, that could be including some revenue back to the owner. It's an owner occupied, as I've proved in my rebuttal, that they're only built as owner occupied. So something is going on with that lease. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, but you have no information to show that one way or the other. Okay, and then you say you would take out the highest one. That's generally what would happen. Would you take out a low end one that seems a bit lower than the rest?
Depends how low it is. You're talking about, this one you're talking about $16, $11, and $10. That's extremely high.
Okay.
It's not a $3 or $4 range. It's a $16 range.
Madam Chair, Mr. Rack continues to repeat himself over and over. Could we get him to answer the question and then
I just want yes or no
please?
answers.
Oh, I'm asking Mr. Rack if he can make an answer and move on. We're hearing his same evidence over and over again.
Okay.
Yes,
At page 5 and 6, you're claiming that because they're in a strip mall, that increases the value. So you're saying, I'm going for an eye test. I look at Boyd Auto Body and think, oh, I need some body work on my car now, and that's going to increase the value.
Well, it increases the value because it's visible and you can see it.
Right, but people don't just go out to the shopping store, go to KFC and think, oh, I need body work now at Boyd Auto Body, do they? That seems pretty far-fetched.
Once they know it's there,
Mm-hmm.
when they do need them, they know it's located there because they've driven past it many times.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's more just the location is probably applicable, not really being in the shopping center then, correct?
Well, it has higher visibility in a shopping center.
Right. I mean, opposed to being on like a corner of a main street, you think that's more visibility than being in a shopping center?
Well, it's all hypothetical. I would think of it, you'd see it more.
Well, you're saying hypothetically that's more visibility. I'm saying like look at St. Anne's on the corner of St. Anne's.
Okay, let's just answer the question and move on.
I have no statistical proof either way.
Okay, so you were just making an assumption. And then looking on your last pages, you're kind of combining franchise and non-franchise rates. Is that correct? On page 14, it looks like.
Well, those are the rates that are in that building.
I'm looking at the table, like it looks like you're comparing or you're adding non-franchise like mom and pop ones and franchise ones like bigger ones like Mr. Lube and Midas and all those. Is that correct?
There makes no
Should
difference.
you referring to, Mr. Dayton? What page are you referring to, Mr. Dayton?
14.
Okay.
As
I guess
an owner,
Could you re-ask the question, please?
I guess my question is, do you not think that larger franchise ones such as Midas and Mr. Lube and such will rent at a higher rate than non-franchise ones, as it's evident in these comparables?
No, a property owner is not going to give mom and pop a break. He's going to try to maximize the rent on his property.
But you can see the ones in the comparables that are mom and pops that are renting for around $10 a square foot, opposed to others at 20. Is that not correct?
And which properties are you referring to?
The ones that are in your comparable table.
Well, which ones?
Well, the ones on 1861 Pembina, the one on King Edward, those ones are mom and pop ones, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so they are renting for lower rates. That's all I was asking.
Well, they're renting at lower rates because the building isn't, the quality
Okay,
of
that's
the
all the
building
questions.
isn't the same as the other ones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deitchen. Mr. Whitbread, do you have questions on the rebuttal?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Del Oro.
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions. So on the rebuttal evidence going forward, Mr. Rack, you will note that if you want to raise any further issues that you haven't already raised, that's your opportunity. And Mr. Deitchen, if you have any questions that you haven't already asked, that's your opportunity going forward, okay? All right, summation, Mr. Deitchen?
I guess just in summary, we have to look at large franchise ones and not small mom and pop ones to use comparables and help support the value. And the comparables that we have support our value. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack?
No summation.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes item number 4.
Madam Chair, may I ask for a 5-minute recess?
Sure, let's recess until 10:25.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we are now moving on to item number 5, I guess I should say, call the meeting back to order. We are on item number 5 of our agenda, file number 24-344. Mr. Deitchen, when you're ready, you may begin with your evidence, please.
Okay. File number 24-344. Roll number 080050707010. Address is 1585 St. Mary's Road. Roll year is 2025. Assessed value is at $960,000. It's a 6CT vehicle service garage. It is one building, 1 story high, built in 2014. The land area is 14,389, and the gross floor area is 3,946. I actually do have a recommendation for this property, as it does have the basement pit area still on there, and that should be removed. So my recommendation is, so it's 1,973 square feet at 2155 square foot. Brings it to 42,518. With still the 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, and $6 a square foot shortfall, brings the NOI to 40,181. The cap rate's still at 4.6%, brings the value to 873,500, rounded to $874,000.
Okay, if I can just repeat that, you've made an adjustment to the square foot to remove the pit. So you've reduced the square feet to 1,973 square feet at a rate of $21.55 per square foot, bringing you an NOI of $40,181, capped at 4.6% for an assessment of $874,000 rounded.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rack, do you accept the recommendation?
No, I don't.
Okay, Mr. Deitchen, Mr. Rack does not accept, so you can carry on with your presentation, please.
Okay, going on to page 2 and 3 are just some photos of the property. You can see it's a super lube on a large piece of land. And then page 4, oh, sorry, back up, sorry. Or no, I haven't got there yet. Sorry, continuing on to page 5 is the zoning R1M residential single family. Then page 6 is the subject sale history. So it sold November 7th, 2013 for $738,000, an arm's length sale, and that's just for the land only. That wasn't for the building. So the land alone is quite valuable for this property. Page 7 is the income breakdown. I more or less went over. I guess I could look at it again.
But you do have the new, the recommendation on the table.
Yes. Yes, sorry, I accidentally closed the recommendation. Do you want me to go through it again?
No, that's okay. I think we got
Okay.
it.
Sorry, all right. Then continuing on to our comparables on page 9 again. Our comparables range from $16 to $31.85. Even if we remove the one that expired in 2021, we still have a nice range between 16 and 31.85, with a median of $21. And these are for franchise properties like the subject. Again, the cap rate table on page 10 shows our cap rate percentiles from 20th to 80th percentile for the various property types. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. And then page 12 and 13 is the I&E for the subject. Then page 14 and 15 are some permits for the building that was constructed in 2014. So you can see the total project value is $700,000, along with the purchase price of $730,000. I think more than supports our valuation. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rack, questions for the assessor?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whitbread?
I have none, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro?
I have none either, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions either, so thank you very much, Mr. Deitchen. Mr. Rack, your presentation, please.
Thank you. So page 1 has pictures of the building. Page 2, you will see that the building went up 47% from the last reassessment, which means that every 4 years, the value of the building doubles, and I don't think that's realistic. There is a 2023 municipal board pending on the property. So the assessor removed the basement. So page 3 is basically just talking about the basement space. So I won't go through that since he did remove the basement space. And page 4 deals with that. And same as page 5. So on page 5, I have my comparables that I've used on the other properties. So I won't spend time on those. We've gone through those already. So if you go down to page 6 or 7, and I have the assessor's comparables, I've gone through that already. So with the McPhillips Street comparable, it's at $16, so that's a total of 10 comparables. I've gone through the Portage Avenue comparables. So basically now we're down to, so I'm going to use $16 for the main floor space. As I said, I've gone through everything above that, so I won't go into that again. So based on the comparables and the McPhillips comparable from the assessor, I'm using $16. So now it's the cap rates for the subject property. So you'll see for this subject property, in 2018, it was 5.75%. In 2020, it was 5.4%. In 2023, it was 5.65%. And now for 2025, it's 4.6%. I think that's unrealistic. So the 2025 cap rate does not represent a market rate for cap rates. Cap rates increase when interest rates increase. So the initial cost of capital requires a purchaser to pay more in interest when borrowing money, and therefore requires a greater return on investment to cover costs. So if you go, the next setting is navigating the changing tides, the impact of rising interest rates on prices and cap rates. So basically, these are articles that deal with the interest rates and cap rates. And as we know that the interest rates have been increasing. So since the interest rates are increasing, the cap rates should follow suit. So on the bottom there on page 8, it says interest rates and real estate are intrinsically linked. When interest rates rise, the cost of borrowing increases, affecting the affordability of financing for real estate investments. This in turn can impact both property prices and cap rates. So basically, property prices and cap rates on page 9 is basically capitalization rates or cap rates are a key metric in real estate investing. They represent the relationship between the property's net operating income, NOI, and its current market value. In a rising interest rate environment, cap rates tend to increase. This is because investors typically seek higher returns to compensate for the increased borrowing costs and perceived risks. So at 4.6%, that's extremely low when you compare it to previous years. So basically on page 9, and you're going on to page 10, is rising interest rates, the cost of capital. So fluctuations in the interest rate environment can contribute to rising cap rates. So that's what we're talking about. What should the cap rate be for this property? And then in the middle of page 10, you'll see that according to Moody Analytics, national average cap rate for the first quarter of 2024 on all commercial properties sold expanded to 6.2%. So cap rates are going up. If you look at Sunrise Credit Union and Manitoba Credit Union, for commercial rates, they've got a closed fix at 5.85%, which is the lowest if you go for a 3-year fixed. And if you go to page 11, you'll see from Vancouver Commercial Mortgages, you'll go down there and you'll see basically an owner-occupied. Fixed down is 6.22%. And page 12, again, it's talking about cap rates increasing. And in the middle there, it says, what does a 7.5% cap rate mean? Does a 7.5% cap rate means the investment property will generate a net operating income, which equates to 7.5% of the property's value. So you need to cover the cost of borrowing money when you purchase a property, and that is basically an indication of what the cap rate should be. So on the bottom of page 12, commercial loan interest rates have increased. In order to pay off a loan, the cap rate, which indicates your return on investment, needs to be at least the same as the interest rates charged on your loan. At that rate, you will break even and not generate any positive cash flow. A cap rate of 5.75% on the subject property is the minimum required to try and achieve a break-even point. So if you go to page 13, again, you'll see the department's cap rates on this particular property. 2018 were 5.75%, 2020 was 5.4%, 2023 was 5.65%, and 2025 was 4.6%. So there's an extreme jump between 23 and 25. And I don't think that's realistic. Now below is basically the charts that the city uses, and it's from CRBE, Cushman and Wakefield, and Colliers. And you'll see in the left-hand column under A, there's no cap rate that low, even for basic. The lowest cap rates, if you go to the next page at the top, multifamily are typically the lowest cap rates on properties. They have the least risk, and therefore the cap rate is extremely low. Now, if you're looking at a high-rise A building for a multifamily, it's at 4.75. That's the closest. Colliers has it at 5.5% with an average of 5.13%. That's for a residential. That's the lowest. So you'll see that there's no cap rate that is that low. If you're looking at industrial cap rates, they're all in, for an A building, they range from 5.25 to 6. And basically the high raises from 5.75 to 7. And that's for an industrial building. So if you go down to the next page, page 14, the last page, you'll see that apartments have the lowest cap rates, but there are no cap rates on any type of property at 4.6%. The closest to consider would be industrial property, or would be industrial property. The department's using 4.6% cap rate. So I'm going to apply $16 based on my comparables for the main floor, and I'm going to use a cap rate of 5.65%. And two properties you have today for 2025 is Pembina Highways at 6.1% and 3400 Portage is at 6.45%. So I'm using lower than those two. So applying $16 rent, the city's parameters, and a cap rate of 5.65%, I'm getting a value of $527,000. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Deitchen, do you have questions for Mr. Rack?
Yeah. Can my questions based on the comparables just carry over from each property because they're the same?
Sure.
Okay, then I'll go on to, I guess, page 8, 9, 10, 11. It looks like this is all post-reference information, correct?
Well, 8 isn't.
It says October
9
11th,
isn't.
20, says October 11th, 2023.
That's basically October 11th, 23. This would apply to any year. I mean, it's just discussing what the impact is on interest rates and cap rates. So even though the article's from October 11th, 2023, that would apply to any year because it's just discussing the relationship between interest rates and cap rates.
Okay, then page 10 says 2024 cap rates. That's post-reference, correct? Page 11 shows September 11th, 2024. That's very post-reference then, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's kind of what you're basing your cap rate adjustment on then, correct? The break-even point based on these numbers?
Not exactly on these numbers because these numbers are in the 6% percentile. I'm using 2023. The cap rate was 5.65% on this property, and that's what I'm using in my valuation. It was the cap rate from 2023 on this property.
Yeah. Sorry, just give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry about that. So then how did you determine a 5.75% cap rate is the break-even point for this property?
I determined that by basically the 2023 5.65% and basically at 5.75% based on the interest rates, how they've gone up. I've just estimated that a 5.75% would probably be a break-even point. Although for my calculation, I use 5.65% from 2023.
Okay, but to determine the break-even point, you would have to know what the income is for this property, correct?
Well, that is just based on what the industry, is basically talking about as far as how a cap rate relates to income. And I mean, if you're looking at a 5.65% interest rate, you would be looking at a 5.65% cap rate. So I'm taking the city's cap rate from 2023, which I believe that would probably how it would be calculated.
Right, but it says just a paragraph above that on page 12. A 7.5% cap rate means the investment property will generate an NOI that equates to 7.5% of the property's value. So wouldn't you need to know the property's NOI to determine a cap rate or determine a break-even point and thus determine a cap rate for it?
Yes, you would.
Okay, and do we know the NOI for this property, or do you have that information in your brief?
No.
Okay. Looking at page 13 and I guess 14 as well, you have the tables for the CBR rate, E, and Cushman Wakefield and such. Is there ever cap rates that fall out of these ranges? Is ever like some lower, some higher? Or does everything fall in these ranges? Sorry?
I would assume there would be.
Okay. Okay, I think that's much.
those table cap rates that are developed by CBRE, Cushman, Wakefield, and Colliers are basically on their best properties.
Right, yeah, okay, so there would be some lower and higher probably then.
Yes, I would agree with you.
Okay, and I guess one other last question. This is a vehicle service garage. Where would it fit into one of these tables? Or would it not?
It would not. As you stated,
Okay.
there are no cap rates for service garages. That's why I'm quite surprised that I'd like to know how the city came up with 4.6%.
Right, so we don't really know what then the range of vehicle service garage cap rates are then, correct?
No,
Okay,
I
that's
don't
all.
know, and you don't know.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Ms. Del Oro, do you have questions for Mr. Rack?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
No, I'm okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't have questions either, Mr. Rack, so you do have your rebuttal evidence related to the City of Winnipeg's comparables. Do you wish to add anything more?
No, I've covered that.
Okay, Mr. Deitchen? Any additional questions on the rebuttal evidence?
Nothing additional, just the same questions and comments as before.
Okay, Mr. Whitbread?
I have none.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Deitchen, would you care for summation?
Yeah, I guess just quick. I think our value is more than supported. Looking at the land alone at being sold for $730,000 10 years ago, and then the building value being at $700,000. I think more than supports our new valuation. I know the cap rate might look to be on the low end, but for these small, newer properties, great location, it's not completely ridiculous. And I think their value is more than supported. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack?
No, thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes item number 5. And just give me a minute to finish up some notes here. Okay, item number 6, file number 24-345. Mr. Deitchen, whenever you are ready, please.
Okay, yeah, it's file number 24-345, roll number 07548192500. Address is 3400 Portage Avenue. Roll year is 2025, assessed value is at $2,456,000. It is a 60T vehicle service garage as well. It is 2 buildings, 1 story high, built in 1984 to 1986. The land area is 32,878, and the gross floor area is at 12,019 square feet. Page 2 is an overhead view and a street view of the subject property. You can see again, it's another super loop. You can see page 3 is the overhead showing the two buildings. Again, the front one is the oiled and the back is more brakes and tires and such. And then there's a map view showing where the property is in Winnipeg. Page 4 is the zoning for the subject property at C3 Commercial Corridor. Page 6 is the income breakdown for this property. So there's 5 premises. So there's 3 standard ones, and then there's the mezzanine upper areas for storage. So the total, or I'll go through each one. The first one's 1,800 square feet at 2056. Second is 2,708 at 1797. The third one is 3,196 at 1769. And then the mezz areas at 1383 at 1015 and 1132 at 1035, brings the total leasable area to 10,219, and the potential rent at 167,961, and the blended rate for this one is 1643 a square foot. Continuing on, the potential rent, the vacancy is 2%. Expenses 3%. Shortfall is at $6 a square foot. It brings the NOI to 158,438 and the cap rate at 6.45%. Brings the value to $2,456,000. Continuing on again is the same comparables as before, because this is another franchise one. Looking at these franchise rent comparables, again, it ranges from $16 to $31.85, with a median of $21 a square foot. Again, page 9 is the cap rate tables. Page 10 is the Municipal Assessment Act, and then page 11 and 12 is the income and expense mailers for the property. And that's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deitchen. Mr. Rack, do you have questions for the assessor?
Yes, on page 6. Can you explain why on the first one at 1,800 square feet would be the lube center, and then you have 2,708 and 3,196 square feet. Why are there different rates for the service garage?
I would guess the size have something to do with it. They're much larger than the first one. I can't speak exactly why.
Well, I'm just wondering why that was. I mean, it's one building. Why would they divide it up into 2 pieces?
I'm not too sure. I didn't put this building onto record here.
Yeah, there's the same thing as with the mezzanine. Seems strange that it's divided up into 2 pieces, but I guess you've answered that question.
Yeah, I'm not too sure.
No, those are all my questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whitbread, questions for the assessor?
Who are you asking for?
You, questions for the assessor?
So those 2 storage mezzanines then relate to the 2 standard finishes. Is that correct?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
You have two mezzanine spaces,
Mhm.
and then you have 3 standard finishes. So which is the lube station on the standard finish?
The lube station is the first one, the 1,800 square feet.
1,800. And have
Yeah.
you removed the pit from that lube station?
I don't. It's not on the file, but I don't know if this one ever had one. But if it did, it is removed because it's not on here anymore.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I have no questions. So Mr. Rack.
Thank you. So page 1 has a picture of the building, and we can see the bottom. You've seen the pictures before. So on page 1, it's basically an owner occupied. The main floor space is 7,704. Second storage space is 2,515 square feet. And basically, these are the same pictures. Both buildings are pretty much identical, so they'd be similar. So if you go down to the comparisons, I've gone through all those comparisons. And the assessor always says there's a difference between mom and pop stores and the franchises. As you'll see, the 715 there, on the very top of page 4 is Midas, that's a franchise. The 340 Pembina Highway, that's a franchise. And basically the Fort Street Fountain Tire is a franchise, and the Fountain is a franchise. So all those rents are franchise rents, and you're getting the Fort Street at $13. You're getting the 960 Pembina at $12.75. So as we keep So I've gone through all this before. So basically, I'm using $16. And again, there's 10 comparables, including the assessors with Phillips Street at $16. So I'm using $16.50 for this particular property. Basically because there's 3 comparables on Portage Avenue that range from 14, 16, and 20. So I use $16.50, basically increasing the middle one from $16.38 to $16.50 because it's on Portage Avenue. And I'm using half of that rate for the second floor at $825. So you're getting 7704 square feet at $16.50, 2515 at 8 1/4. So you're getting a total of 147,865. And I've got the potential income wrong at 147,325. So basically there's a 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, 6% shortfall, 6.45% cap rate to come with a value of $2,152,000. So there wouldn't be, I mean, I've got above that, it's supposed to be 147,865. I have 147,325. That few dollars difference wouldn't make that much difference in the valuation, since the valuation is at $2,152,268. It would bring it up a little bit, but rounding, we'd still be at $2,152,000. And that's my presentation.
Thank you very much. Mr. Deitchen, questions?
I guess my questions carry over. One other quick question. You're saying 3 and 4 franchise. Don't you find it weird that there's an $8 difference between those two?
Which ones are you talking about?
3 and 4, 750 Narran and 340 Pembina. There's an $8 difference. It seems like 1179 is quite low.
1179 and number 3, and what was the other one?
And for 1983, it looks like it says.
Which comparable numbers? We're talking about number 3, and which was the other comparable?
3 and 4, 3 and 4, 3, 4.
3 and 4. Yeah, there is quite a big difference.
Yeah. Do you know why there's such a big difference between the two? Like why 1179 is so low?
No, I don't.
Okay. And I guess I just wanted to touch on this again. 123.4 is a step of lead or rent, and we don't know exactly what they're paying at the reference date, correct?
For which one? The 960.
123 Fort. 123 Fort.
Well, they're basically, when this was put out in 2023, they're paying $13.
Do you have that information in your brief?
No, I don't.
Because earlier you were saying it's a step up lease and you're not too sure what it's at currently, correct?
Well, that was the last step up, as I believe.
Okay, but you're not too sure of that. Is that correct?
I don't have evidence to support that, no.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. Ms. Del Oro, do you have questions for the applicant?
I don't, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread.
I have nothing, thanks.
Thank you. And I have no questions either. So, Mr. Rack, you will have your rebuttal evidence on this property as well.
Thank you.
And do you have anything you'd like to add?
Nope.
Okay, Mr. Deitchen, do you have anything you'd like to note on the rebuttal or ask a question?
Nothing further now.
Okay. Mr. Whitbread?
Nothing, thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro?
Nothing for me, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, summation, Mr. Deitchen?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack?
No, thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes item number 6. Okay, let me just take a second here. Item number 7 is file number 24-353. Mr. Deitchen, when you are ready, please.
This is file number 24-353, roll number 13070542000, and the address is 1010 Arlington Street. It's roll year 2025, assessed values at $2,289,000. It is a 60T vehicle service garage as well. It is 2 buildings, 1-story high, built in 1960 to 1999. The land area is 32,319, and the gross floor area is 22,204. Page 2, you can see the aerial view and the street view of the property. Along with page 3, you can see some more street view property or views of the property. Continuing on to page 4 is just the Google map of the location in the city. Page 5 is the zoning for the property. It's zoned at M2 manufacturing. Continuing on to page 7 is the income breakdown. So it's a VSG with 1 premise, total areas at 22,004 square feet. And the rent is set at $932 a square foot, brings the potential rent to $205,077 with 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, and $6 per square foot shortfall. It brings the NOI to $192,306 with a cap rate of 8.4%. Brings the value to $2,289,000. And then continuing on is on page 9 is the rent comparables. So these are for non-franchise ones, more mom and pop type, and you can see that the range is quite different. There are some bit higher properties, but for the most part, it ranges from $9 to $28.29, with an average of $15.05 and a weighted average of $12.46, with a median of $12.95 cents a square foot. So you can see that at our rate at 932, we're way below the range, or we're at the bottom of the range, and for the comparables. Again, page 10 is the cap rate tables. Page 11 is the Municipal Assessment Act excerpts. Page 12 and 13 are the income and expense mailers. And then page 14 is just a permit that was from 2021. And it was some interior alterations to replace a paint booth and paint mixing room. And that value is about $95,000. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rank.
Yes, on page 14, you have, as you stated, interior alterations, replace a paint booth and a paint mixing room. Do any of your comparables have paint booths and paint mixing rooms?
I'm not too sure.
That's all my questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whitbread.
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Del Oro.
Yes, I have one question. Comparable number 4, 721 watt, seems to be quite an outlier in terms of rent. Do you know specifically why that one was chosen, that property? How is it similar to subject property?
It is a mom and pop type one. Like I could tell you the exact, do you want me to tell you who? It's Mellotech Auto Clinic, so it's not a franchise type one. That's why I was added in there. It is a bit higher, but that's what they're renting it for.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Deitchen, have you inspected this property?
The subject property, no, I have not.
Okay, and what do they do here? Do you know?
They do all sorts of service. They do, like, it's going to be in my rebuttal actually.
Okay,
Yeah. But it's a full one-stop shop here. They do everything: glass, body work, oil, yeah, everything.
so, okay. And your comparables.
Mhm.
What, can you just go through them quickly and just tell me what they are?
Like who is using them?
Yeah, like what type of, I see it's a vehicle service garage, I see that, but is it similar to this is what I'm kind of going
Okay.
for.
Yeah, so the first one's Duals Exhaust and Service Center, so it's a vehicle service garage. Second one's Earl's Automotive. Third one's Anchor Marine. Fourth one is Mellotech Auto Clinic. Five is Tony's Auto Academy Auto Service. Six is Urban Garage Auto. Seven is Signature Motors. Eight is Fast Fleet Solutions. Nine is LNC Auto Services. And then 10 is Under the Hood Auto Services.
So auto services, what does that mean? Does
They
that
provide
mean paint and lubes and, does that mean everything? Or is that a specific type?
it could, I'm not too sure exactly which ones, but it would probably be a mixture. Some might be all, some might be just more specific services. I don't know exactly for each one.
Okay, and I have another question too, related to these comps.
Mhm.
According to your evidence, the property's leasable square feet for this is 22,000 square feet.
Mhm.
With respect to your comps, 9 out of 10 comps are less than 8,000 square feet and 7 out of 10 are less than 5,000 square feet. Only one is over 15,000. How do these small premises relate to your comp or your subject property?
Like they're all still vehicle service garages. It's hard to find anything over like 10,000 square feet for these type of things. And yeah, that's all we could find for comparables.
Is this property unique then in terms of what they do?
I guess potentially, like I said, it's a one-stop shop, so maybe like I'm not sure if, yeah, I don't want to say one way or the other. I'm not too sure.
Okay, if you're not sure, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Sorry.
Okay, the square footage sort of stood out at me, right?
Yeah.
They're all quite small, with the exception of one, which is 17,000, almost 18,000 square feet, and everything
Yeah.
else is pretty small compared to your subject. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I have no additional questions. So, Mr. Rack.
Thank you. The panel member had asked about the Watt Street property. I have that property in my rebuttal. That
Okay.
Watt Street property is actually a Domo station,
Okay, so we'll
Domo gas station.
Okay, so we'll deal with that rebuttal when we get to it.
Okay, so in my brief, you'll see on page 1, there's 3 pictures of the property. And you'll see that there's only 2 entrance doors into the property. It's not like a service garage that has multiple doors in the front. This is a body shop. In 2023, an assessor came down and took multiple pictures of the interior of the building. So that should be on file. There are no car hoists inside this building. They don't do regular service and repair like a service garage because oil and any kind of oil products are actually contaminants that can affect paint on a car. Like they don't use any silicone sprays, anything, brake cleaners, that type of stuff could damage paint. So page 1, you'll see the property itself is basically a body shop. The building is basically a flex warehouse and it's coded as a service garage. So below, I'm showing you examples on page 2 of what a service garage looks like. So you'll see service garages have a retail area on one side where they have displays of the tires and the different products they sell. And if you look, let's say on the top picture, Fountain Tire there, you could look right through the building and you'll see at the back of the building there are overhead doors. So you can enter from the back or the front to get service on your car, and there's car hoists at the back and the front. And you see that that's on Regent. Now, if you see at McPhillips, you can see through the building again, and you can see that there's overhead doors at the back. The service garages have multiple doors because cars don't sit in there very long. They come in, they get their service, and they basically leave. So there's a big turnover of cars. That's why there's multiple doors. And if you look at the 2026 Pembina Highway, the Superloop Express there, it's tune and brakes. You can see at the back there, you can see through the building. So it has doors at the back too. And then at the Portage Avenue and the McPhillips, you can see that there's multiple doors. And that's what a service garage typically looks like. So vehicles are not serviced at this property. They are repaired due to crash damage. So basically, it's not a service garage. The property itself is a flex warehouse. So if you go down to page 4, after the 1010 Arlington Street income build up for the value at 2.289. So you go to page 4, you'll see that 983 Wall Street was at the Board of Revision, and it's basically Mako Auto Body. And you can see the same thing. It's basically 2 doors in the front. And that's coded as a storage warehouse, which the subject property should be a storage warehouse. So if you go down to page 5, you'll see these are all the comparables for storage warehouse that the assessor used for that property. And they're all in the $7 range. Go to page 6, that's the assessor's brief, where after he examined the property and looked at the rents, he came to a lower rent and basically made a recommendation to reduce the property. And if you look at his workup, he used $7.19 a square foot. So on page 7 at the bottom, the first picture of a property, assessors comparables at 960, 982, and 986 are all the same types of properties. And 986 is a picture of is 12,000 square feet at $7.16, which is similar to the subject property. You go down to the comparison number 2, the 1733 St. Matthews at 15,019 square feet at $731, which has an office in the front and is similar to the property with entrance doors on the side. And then you get to the Johnson report asking rents, June 2023. You've got 1258 Border Street, 8,536 square feet at $675. The next one is King Edward. Better location, it's basically 16,274 at $795. You go down to the next one, bottom of page 8, which is 240 Sherwin Road, is 18,810 square feet at $650. And then you get the Johnson report for 2022 asking rents December, and you get Fife at 42,575 square feet at $650. You've got Inkster at 12,675 square feet at $725. So you scroll down, you'll see my chart there with assessors rents ranging from the best ones that I found that are most similar to the property, subject property at 12,000 to 15,000 square feet, from below $7 to $731. You got the Johnson report, June 2023, going from $650 up to $795, with the bottom Sherwin Road at 18,810 square feet. And then you get the Fife at 42,000 square feet from the December 22, Johnson report at $650, the Inkster 12,675 at $725. So we're getting an average of $7.03 per square foot. So the properties I think that are most like the subject property are St. Matthews at $730 and the Inkster at $725. So I'm using the parameters for a warehouse, which is from the Wall Street property. So I'm reducing the cap rate from 8, that is for this property, from 8.4% to 7.6%. I'm increasing the vacancy for the parameters that are used on warehouses from 2.4 or 2% to 4%, and reducing the shortfall from $6 to $4. And those are flex warehouse parameters, or just basically warehouse parameters. So using 22,004 square feet at 730, applying the warehouse parameters in the cap rate, I'm getting a value of 1,922,000. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rack. Mr. Deitchen, questions for the applicant?
Just a few. Would you consider warehouses inferior to vehicle service garages in terms of finishes and such of things like that, and they'll lease at a lower rental rate?
As far as finishes go, I wouldn't say they're inferior, they're the same. But
Okay,
a
well, the
warehouse would have a lower, a service garage would have a higher rent due to its construction and the nature of a service garage with multiple doors than
Okay.
would a warehouse.
Okay. And are any of your comparables vehicle service garages?
No, they're all warehouses.
How come you adjusted the cap rate on this property?
I adjusted the cap rate because if you look at page 3, oh, page 3, the Arlington, no, sorry, give me a sec here. Page 7. Those are the parameter, the overall cap rate on a storage warehouse is 7.6%.
Okay. I guess looking at that, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I used the same parameters as you'll see on page 7 for a storage warehouse for the subject property.
Okay. I guess looking at page, say 4 to 7, are we comparing assessments here then?
Four to 7, no.
Well, on page 4, you
I'm
state
using,
the assessment or the recommendation at a certain rate. Are you using that to come to your valuation?
no, I'm using my comparables on page, would be 10.
Okay.
That property is not in my comparables.
Okay. And is there a reason you increased the vacancy from 2 to 4%, as this is a single tenant with a lease?
Again, if you look at page 7,
Mhm.
those are the parameters that the department uses for a storage warehouse. They use 4% vacancy loss, they use 3% for expenses, and they use 7.6% for the cap rate.
But that's specific to that property, is it not?
The work up on page 7?
Yeah.
Well, those are the parameters for a storage warehouse that the city's developed.
Well, those are the parameters for that property, that subject property at 983 Wall. It's not a blanket rates for every property that's similar.
Well, any storage warehouse that the city has would have the same parameters at 4% vacancy, expenses at 3%. The cap rate might vary, but the vacancy loss and the expenses are the same. I have multiple storage warehouses and they're all the same.
Okay, no further questions, thanks.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Del Oro, questions for the applicant?
No, nothing at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread?
And I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So just to confirm, Mr. Rack, it's your position that this is not categorized properly based on its current use, that it's not a vehicle storage or vehicle service garage. It's a flex warehouse because that's how other similar type uses are categorized, right? And then you have used the parameters that's in that industrial section that the assessor has used for vacancy, expenses, and shortfall. And then the cap rate, you're making a recommendation on the cap rate based on other properties that you're aware of, correct?
Yes, not, I'm using the storage warehouse not on its base of use, but what the property actually is, the physical construction of the property. Like the
Okay.
property is constructed similar to, it's like a warehouse.
Right. You're saying it's not a vehicle service garage, given the building characteristics.
Yes, and the fact that there are no hoists inside the building, it's not a service garage.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mr. Rack, you do have your rebuttal evidence on this, correct? Is it the same rebuttal evidence as previous?
Yes,
Okay. Mr.
and
Deitch, pardon me?
and then on the last page of that rebuttal is the 721 picture of 721 Watt Street, which has the it's a Domo station plus a repair shop. So I imagine it's it has gas pumps, so that would probably indicate why the rent is so high.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Deitchen, did you have questions about the rebuttal?
No other questions, no.
Okay, Ms. Del Oro?
No, thank you for clarifying the Watt Street property.
Mr. Whitbread?
I have nothing, thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Deitchen, you indicated you also have rebuttal evidence on this item?
That's correct.
Okay, give us a minute to get that out of our files, please. Does everybody have it?
No,
I don't have it.
Should be there.
Does Mr. Rack have it?
I emailed it to him really bad.
Mr. Rack, can you check your email? You may have it there.
I'm checking right now and I don't see it. It's not here.
and I've refreshed and I don't have it yet either. That would be at number 8, I imagine,
I sent it.
Under number 7.
or number 7. That's where I should have looked initially. Thank you. Hmm.
I sent to Mr. Rackwood at 11:04 a.m.
It was sent at 11:04 a.m., Mr. Rack.
I don't have it. Where was it sent to?
Our Ms. Graywood has indicated she has emailed it to you, so maybe we can.
It would have been to your, let's see here, let's make sure I've got the right email address for you.
So it was sent to lrack@shaw.ca.
Yes, yep.
No, I don't have it.
I'll just forward that to you one more time. Then.
Send it to you again.
I've got it.
Okay.
Madam Chair, is this the
Yes.
same rebuttal that the assessor used in number 4?
No, there was no assessor rebuttal for item 4.
Why do I have this twice? Just bear with me for a moment.
Sure. Mr. Deitchen, when you open it up, the very first thing you see is drive with confidence, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. It's the, if you refresh, it's the second item under 7. Item number 7, second item.
It starts rebuttal 2025.
Item 7-24353.
but when I open it, it's rebuttal 2025, October 4th, 9 a.m.
When I open it up, it says drive with confidence, great big picture.
It's looking at the applicant rebuttal.
You're looking at the applicant rebuttal, maybe?
Bear with me, let me just go back again.
Yeah, that's okay. Want to make sure. Yes, you're looking at applicant rebuttal. So look in the second
Yeah, bear with me.
file.
I see
Yeah.
them there.
That's okay.
AT&T rebuttal, and it says, drive with confidence. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Appreciate
Okay,
your patience.
Mr. Deitchen.
Okay, we're all there.
Yep.
Sorry, just bear with me 1 second. I'm lost. Nope, found it. Okay, so here's just from Winter's Auto website. You can see their MPI accredited repair shop, and they have services, collision, auto service, and glass. Then you can go down, you can see they do body work, paint work, services, oil, tire, suspension, diagnostics, alignment, brakes, AC, and then the last page just shows that they do some glass work as well. And that is my rebuttal, Evans. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rack,
That's,
can you speak up a little?
do you know, okay, do you know what the address is of that location?
The location of the property is 1010 Arlington.
No, Winter's Collision Repair.
I'm assuming 1010 Arlington.
No, it's not. They own the building next door. It's at 1020 Arlington. As I said, auto body shops do not do service. And right now, I'm presently going to send an email to basically, I mean, one could, when I looked at what you sent, it'd be very easy to confuse that. That you would think it's there, but they actually purchased Allen's Frame Repair, and they expanded that building. I didn't appeal that property, but it's basically at 1020 Arlington. It's not in the same building, but it's under the same heading.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to send the board.
Oh, just wait. No, you can speak to it. We'll need to have a discussion about that if we're accepting new evidence, but you can certainly speak to it, Mr. Rack.
Okay, well, if you go online and you punch in Winter's, because they don't have it on their website because it's right next door, it's across the street, but Winter Collision Auto Repair auto shop is at 1020 Arlington. It's across the street. So if you punch that in on your Google, you'll find that it's at 1020 Arlington, not 1010. So that's why I wanted to send that to you to show you that it's the wrong building. So I have sent that to the board so you can decide whether or not you want to look at that. But I could see the confusion because it's
Okay.
the same name.
Regardless of that, then this area would still be all used for services. It would be different than a warehouse that just has a shell that is to store stuff. There's still all these services. The main building clearly still has body work and paint work in there. So they're providing services to cars. So they're car service building. If maybe they don't do these other ones at this site, they still offer it right next door. I would say it would still increase the value of this property as well because it's a one-stop shop. And yeah, so that's my evidence either way.
Mr. Rack, do you have any more questions for Mr. Deitchen?
I have no more questions.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread,
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Del Oro,
I have none, thank you.
thank you. Mr. Deitchen, can you clarify, is 1020 Arlington on a different roll number?
I'm not too sure. I would have to look into that further.
I can confirm that it's on a different roll number. It's across the street. I have that property in my portfolio also. So it's a different roll number. I could find that roll number for you if you'd like.
No, that's okay. I'm just wondering. So, Mr. Deitchen, your contention is that because these two are close together, that would influence or cause the rent to increase.
Yeah, along with it still services cars, it does body shop, it has a paint booth, so it does paint work. It's not a warehouse, it's not just storing stuff in there. They're still doing auto service work.
In a different building though, correct?
No, they still do body work and paint work in this one for sure.
Yeah, body work and paint work for sure, but
Yes.
you're
So
saying
it's-
that they also in this at 1010 Arlington, they also do other things like oil changes and tires and.
Well, that was under my impression, but if it's across the street, then it's across the street. I'm not too sure. I just was going by what's on their website, and it didn't state that one way or the other.
Okay. Okay,
I have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
Just to be clear, we're talking about two separate buildings. So 1010 is on one property roll number and 1020 is another property roll number. And you're trying to say that because they're in the vicinity and they're owned by the same, it should be considered one property for this assessment? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying it should be one property, but like it was under my impression that all this work was done at in the one building that the subject. If it's done across the street and they're all owned by the same owner, it's all the same company, I think that still adds value. And like I said, they're still doing body and paint work in 1010 Arlington, regardless of everything else. That's still auto service, in my opinion.
But it's not the same property.
Like I said, I'm not too sure. I didn't look into 1020 because on their website I didn't see anything indicating that. But
you have that information if you wanted to have it before you
I could
presented
look
it?
into it if you gave me some time. Yeah.
Hey, no, I think we're fine.
May I
Thank
ask,
you very much.
may I ask a question, Madam Chair?
Of course,
Whose responsibility is it then, Clayton, if this has to have a class change or a descriptor change to flex warehouse? Is that the applicant's responsibility or is that an inspection required by the assessment department?
It would have to be brought forward one way or the other, then we would have to inspect it and determine from there. But like I think the applicant said, someone did inspect it last year and had pictures. I didn't see those, but so I'm thinking that it was reviewed and deemed that it should still be a vehicle service garage.
Yeah, but if he wants to change that, then he has to make application to change it.
Yeah, he would have to request it. We would have to go through it again and
Gotcha.
see.
I understand. Thank you. No other questions.
thank you very much. Mr. Deitchen, would you care for summation on this property?
I guess just quickly to go over it all again. This is a vehicle service garage. Whether they provide all the other additional services, they still service body and paint. They have a paint booth in there and such. It's not a flex warehouse. They're not just storing stuff in there. They're doing car service work. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Rack, summation?
Yes, as far as changing the classification or the coding of the property, that's up to the assessment department. That's been brought up, probably for 10 years that should be changed. The assessor came down, inspected the property, and they just don't want to change it. So it's up to them to change. As far as the property, the physical property is a warehouse. I mean, there are no lifts in there like a service garage. The service area is at 1020. And if the buildings went vacant and they are rented out, one building doesn't, I mean, there's nowhere in an appraisal definitions or any kind of information in appraisal when it comes to appraising properties that states that the building across the street influences the value of the other building. I mean, that just doesn't exist. I mean, each building is separate on its own title and they're valued individually. So I don't think that applies. It's basically a portable spray booth that you can take out, and the inside of the building is just a body shop. I mean, in one day, he could drive all the cars out of that body shop take that portable spray booth down, and it'd be a warehouse. That's what it is. What's being done inside that space, whether it's for storage or working on cars, as far as auto body, there's no difference because there are no lifts or anything service related. So it's basically a warehouse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes item number 7. Okay, last item on our agenda. Item number 8. Just give everybody a minute to get ready. It's file number 24-346. Mr. Deitchen, whenever you are ready, please.
Okay. File number 24-346, roll number 0900757090. Address is 1384 Regent Avenue West. Roll years 2025, assessed values at $5,077,000. Is a 60T vehicle service property. There's 5 buildings, 1 story high, and the year built ranges from 1987 to 1988. The total land area is 145,845, with the gross floor area being 24,380. Page 2, you can see the overhead view of the property. You can see the multiple buildings on the property. You can see the Google Street View. Page 5 or 3 is another overhead with another street view, trying to show off the different buildings. Page 4 is just the map showing where the property is located in the city. Page 5 is the zoning for the subject property, so it's C3 commercial corridor. And then page 7 is the market income breakdown for the property. So the first one is the restaurant. It's George's Burgers. It's 2160 square feet at a rental rate of 2505. It brings the potential rent to 54,108. With a vacancy of 4%, expenses 3%, shortfall at $9 a square foot, brings the NOI to 49,608, and the cap rate to 6%. And that brings the total value to $827,000 for the restaurant portion. The second portion is the vehicle service garage buildings. So there's a bunch of buildings. They total 19,612 square feet. And the blended rate for this is $1,574. The potential rent is $308,000, $308,747, with a vacancy at 2%, expenses 3%, shortfall of $6 per square foot, brings the NOI to $291,142, with a cap rate of 6.85%, brings the value to $4,250,000. And with those two combined, the two income streams, the total value comes to $5,077,000. Again, we got the vehicle service garages comparable. So these again are the franchise ones. So they range from $16 to $31.85, with an average of $22.27 and a median of $21 a square foot. And you can see that our subject falls in line with that, because the highest per square foot rate for the subject is $18.22. And continuing on to page 11 is the restaurant rent comparables. You can see that it ranges from $24 to $37 a square foot, with an average of $28.17. So our current rate of $25 is well in line with that. Continuing on to page 12, again, is the cap rate table. Page 13 is the Municipal Assessment Act information. And then on page 14, 15, 16 is the income and expense mailers. And then page 17 and 18 are just some permits for the property. So there was some don't know why it's quite hard to read, but there's some exterior work to the car wash, it looks like, for $75,000 or $65,000. And then the last one was in 2021, some exterior work, replacement of metal exterior and stucco. So just some work to the exterior of some of the buildings for $159,000. And that is my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deitchen. Mr. Rack, questions for the assessor?
Yes, on these permits that you have at the end of your brief, was there any calculation in your workup for a capital cost, basically amortized over a number of years?
No.
Okay, you bring up this mom and pop and franchise idea. So basically, on this property, they're all basically mom and pop operations, correct?
No, the Super Lube and the stuff is not.
Well, the Super Lube is not a franchise. Super Lube is owned by a gentleman in Manitoba here in Winnipeg who started those. So it's not a franchise. There's no franchise fees being paid to anybody. Are you aware of that?
Okay, well, there's multiple in the city, so I think it's just more than a one-off mom and pop is my point then.
Okay, so you agree it's not a franchise.
I don't know. You're saying that. I'm not too sure.
Okay, so what you're saying is a mom and pop operation can't have more than one location?
I'm saying that they're more smaller, generally probably single location. I'm not too sure. Besides that,
do you have any definition? Like, you haven't supplied anything in your briefs to give a definition of what a mom and pop operation is and how it affects rent, do you?
nothing in my brief here. No.
Okay. And as far as your comparables on page 10, you don't have any comparables on Region Avenue, correct?
I don't believe so. No.
Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Rack. Mr. Whitbread, do you have questions for the assessor?
I do. So if I understand, your information is derived from a model. This is a model-driven. These are model-driven numbers that you provide.
That is correct.
And when the model goes out, it picks quite a high number of properties to compare, does it not?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
When the model picks, it picks from a high number of rent comparables, not just the 8 or 10 you provide or the 15 that you provide. It picks from hundreds, maybe thousands. Is that correct?
That could be. I'm not too sure. I don't.
Sorry, let me ask it another way then. Does it pick more than what you've got here?
Probably. I would say. I can't say one way or the other.
Well, when I look at page 10,
Mm-hmm.
got vehicle service garage rent comparables, and you've got 5.
Mm-hmm.
Do you suggest the model has only picked 5 and provided these for you?
No, I'm saying that I don't know exactly, but I would assume yes.
Okay. And then how did you pick these 5? Do you go in and at your discretion pick these 5?
Again, we look for franchise ones, so ones with multiple locations, so ones like Fountain Tires, Super Lube, Midas, and stuff like that.
Sure, but you pick them yourself.
I didn't pick these ones specifically. No, these are the same ones we used before.
Sorry, who picked these?
Another colleague.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So did you put this entire report together for this property, or somebody else did it?
I put these into the report, yeah.
Okay.
Into my evidence, sorry? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I put them into the evidence, so yeah.
Earlier in his evidence, Mr. Rack suggested that an appraiser or an assessor could pick the highest rents from the model provided rents in order to support his argument for a higher value for the property.
Okay.
Is that possible?
I don't think that's what happened here.
No, that's not what I'm asking you. Is it possible?
I mean, anything's possible. The applicant can pick low ones too, so there's,
Right, but I'm just asking about higher ones, more favorable ones.
I guess if we want to go with a hypothetical, possibly.
Okay. Okay, you're not suggesting that you did that in this case.
No, and I have a range from 16 to 31, so I don't think I did.
Okay. You don't think, or you know?
Like I said, I did not make these comparables, but looking at them, there is a good range of 16 to $31.
Thank
So I
you.
don't think I would have taken out 16 and the $20 and just had those few high ones.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify for my own mind here. I appreciate it. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread. Ms. Del Oro, questions?
Well, just to clarify do you know what the definition of a franchise is as opposed to just a business having multiple locations? Because you seem to confuse the two.
I guess maybe I shouldn't have used franchise. I should have said just more higher end, more location properties, maybe not just franchise.
So franchise generally would have more benefits than a mom and pop shop, as you call it, that just has multiple locations, so they could command higher rents.
I'm not sure I
I think
understand.
that type of thing, advertising.
Yeah, like Superloop has multiple locations. People know, oh, Superloop is a trusted.
We've been, it's not a franchise.
Sorry?
I believe the applicant's evidence was that Superloop wasn't a franchise.
I don't know if that was in his evidence. He was just stating that, and I'm not too sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Deitchen, I'm just looking at your restaurant comps.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen restaurant comps all morning.
Yeah.
So the restaurant is George's. Would this be considered like a fast food type of restaurant or sit down restaurant, or what kind of restaurant is it?
It is a fast food, but it does have a dining area in it as well. Yeah.
Okay, so on your restaurant comps,
Mm-hmm.
which comps then would be like our subject?
I would say, so we have 801 Regent is a way back burger, so it's a similar burger place, has some seating as well. There's 1530 Regent, 1530 Unit 31B is a Red Swan Pizza, so it's a pizza place, but they still have some area to sit down. 1530 Regent Unit 14 is a sushi place, so they do takeout and dine-in sushi. 1575 Unit 4 is a Indian food place, and I believe it's a takeout and dine-in as well, like some dining as well. The first one, 1575 Regent, is a Japanese restaurant, and again they do some dine-in and takeout. Yeah, so there is one that I'll admit I probably should have omitted, is 1579 Regent is Ben and Florentine. It's just more of a sit-down restaurant place, so that one I would say is probably not the best for that.
Is that Unit 3, 1579?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So that one's more just a straight sit-down restaurant. So
Okay, and what's 808 Regent?
let me double check. That one's a Wendy's actually.
Or Wendy's?
Yeah.
It would be different than the subject?
I mean,
Again,
I would say it's similar because they have some dine-in and it's a fast food takeout burger place. I mean, it probably had, like, it shows it's a bit higher rent because it's a bigger chain restaurant.
mm-hmm. Is George's a chain in the sense that Wendy's is?
I don't think it's a national. I think I'm not too sure exactly, but
Yeah.
I think there's some in the city. I'm not sure outside though.
Yeah, okay. And so based on these rents, you have, you're proposing, or your model is using a $25 rent,
Hmm.
and your model, or these comps you say would support that?
I do, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Mr. Rack.
Thank you. So we start with page 1. And you will see that there are 5 buildings. The building number 5 is the Lube Center. You go to page 2. So the basement should be removed from the Lube Center as the department did in 2026 Pembina and 3400 Portage. I don't know if the just one sec. But it appears like there is no Lube Center that the assessor used, which is good. So if you go to page 2 or page 3, there's a sketch of the site. So you can see that number 1 is the Super Tune and Brake. Number 2 is Enterprise, Canon Auto, Miracle Dent, Super Transmission. Super Transmission is owned by the owner. Super Tune and Brake is owned by the owner of the property. Building number 3 has Super Shine in it, which is owned by the owner. And the owner started Super Shine because Vickers Nissan was in that place, and then the vacant area was another car dealership they used for detailing cars. They moved out years ago, and the owner could not rent out that space. He tried for years to rent that space out and couldn't rent it out. So basically, he took it over and started Super Shine. So basically, they detail and wash cars in there. The vacant space was renovated, and there is a tenant in there, so it's more like office space. And then that building 4 is the restaurant. So if you go to the bottom, you'll see the Lube Center is basically building 5, and it's got a main floor of 2130 square feet. Or sorry, 2096 square feet. And there's pictures of Lube Center. If you keep scrolling down, building 4 is 2160 square feet as original George's, which is the restaurant. Building 3 has Super Shine at 2890 square feet, and Reno Insurance at 1050 square feet. So there's an insurance, they renovated the space for an insurance tenant. So they're getting a little higher rent in that space because it's office space. So building number 3, 9660 square feet, and there's 4 separate units in there. Enterprise, 2013, Canon Auto at 2360, Miracle Dent, 2305, and Super Trans at 3036. So there are no franchises. Super Lube is not a franchise. It's a Manitoba company, or a Winnipeg based company that a gentleman started up years ago, and there are no franchise fees paid to that. And you'll see places like Mr. Lube advertised on TV. You might have heard the commercials on CJOB. That's where the owner does radio commercials. You can't afford to do TV commercials like a franchise, because a franchise would supply within your franchise fees. They would do advertising on TV. Again, it's a Winnipeg-owned company. And same as the bottom building number 1, Super Tune, that's, again, Winnipeg-based company. And that's 3597 square feet. So there's always, as you'll see then all the calculations and valuation, there's always the department uses 3% expenses. And why they use 3% expenses is because A net lease, a type of commercial real estate lease under which you typically pay for one incidental expense directly. So in a single net lease, you usually pay the base rent plus property tax, though in some cases you might pay for insurance or utilities instead. The landlord pays for other expenses. So in a net lease, there's always something that the landlord pays for. So a lot of those rents that the assessor has as comparables, you don't know what's in those, like for $31 on St. Anne's, that's an owner occupied. So basically, if you go down to page 6, you'll see from the University of British Columbia what a gross lease is, a modified gross. So a gross lease, tenant pays rent and property owner pays expenses. And a modified gross or semi-gross lease, tenant and property owner share expenses. And that's what the leases are in this property. They're a semi-modified gross or semi-gross lease where there are some recoveries, but the owner pays for some expenses. So you'll see my comparables below, which are the same comparables I use for other properties. So if you go to page 8, basically the averages I'm using based on those properties is basically $16. I'm using $16. So in my comparables, there are 2 on Nairn. There's 720 Nairn at $16.09. And 720 Nairn is basically the TY Auto. And 750 Nairn, the Midas shop, is basically paying $11.79. So there's 2 comparables on Nairn, which give you basically 2 rents of what properties are getting on Nairn. So I've used $16 for the main floor, and I'm using half at $8 for the mezzanine space. So below on page 8, Super Lube, Super Tune, and basically Super Shine number 7 are all owner occupied, so they're not paying any rent, so the rent is 0. Enterprise pays $16, and they have a large office space, but they do have just an empty space at the back where they wash cars, detail cars. Canada Auto's paying $13.68. Miracle Dent number 5 is paying $15.25. So there are 3 leases, market rents in that property. And the $16 for Enterprise is actually high because they have a larger office space. So I've adjusted the rents for Super Lube that pays no rent, Super Tune that pays no rent, and the mezzanine space at half the main floor, and basically Super Shine at $16, and the number 8 Reno Insurance Office pays $22 because that's all office space, newly renovated office space. So I haven't adjusted that one. So I've adjusted all the rents to $16. Then added to that, so you've got the gross rents, or you had those rents without the recoveries come to $318,253. So basically, everybody pays $575 in recoveries, which doesn't cover all the costs, operating costs. So they're actually paying a semi-gross rent of $21.75 a square foot for all the space. So that's what it works out to. And there's no recoveries on the mezz because that's not adjusted because the mezz space would just be included with the main floor space. So you go to page 9, these are all the expenses. And these expenses cover the restaurant and the garage. So I spoke to the gentleman at Super Lube that basically comes up with all these numbers right off the balance sheets, which I have at the end of my brief. So I adjusted insurance to $16,476. And that's based on similar type properties I do have that have the insurance for individual properties, not multiple properties like this. And the insurance is higher because that insurance actually covers the equipment inside each of those buildings that the owner has. So it covers all his mechanical, like in the lube shop. It covers all the equipment in the garage, etc. And there's other things that are tacked on there. So I basically came up with 16,476, and that's based on about 10 properties I looked at that are not owner occupied, similar in age, and that's basically what I came up with for the insurance on the building. I did that similar with professional fees because they use chartered accountants that monitor everything for the business and the property. So I've reduced that to $6,114. I talked to the same gentleman about the snow. He said the snow cost was extremely high in 2022. So I looked at other years to see what an average would be over time, and I came up with 21,069. So I've reduced that waste and snow. So now instead of being a total expense of 250,154, it's 191,942. So per square foot over all the property, it's $11.61 from 2022, which he used, and my adjustments bring it down to $8.91. So the total main floor area of all the buildings is 21,547. So basically the garage area expenses on 19,387 square feet come up to 172,701. And the recoveries on 19,383, 387 come up to 111,475. That's 575 a square foot. So the unrecoverable expenses on the total property is $3.60 per square foot. Owner doesn't get that, it's unrecoverable. So now we're getting a total net rent from the above adjusted rents of $318,253. We're getting the recoveries at $575 a square foot, and this is just on the not the restaurant, just all the service garages. So the general recoveries is $111,475. So then we get a total gross rent of $429,728, less the expenses of $172,701, come up with an NOI of $257,027. So $257,000 roughly. So over the years, the vacancy going from 2016 to 2021, as you can see, it goes from high at 19% to a low of 5%. And now there's no vacancy because the owner had to take over the vacant space. So he started a new business because he just couldn't rent that space. You can see from 2016 to 2021, he couldn't rent that space. There's been a lot of vacancy in there. So I'm using the 19,387 square feet, which is on the rent roll for all the spaces and has been for years. The rent is now a net of $13.26 per square foot. And I'm applying the vacancy at 2%. No expenses are applied to this because I've taken into account all the expenses. Shortfall at $6. With the vacancy at 2%, that's only $2,326. So 2% vacancy when you're looking at the actual vacancy is over the years is quite low. Using the apartment's cap rate at 6.85%, so we're getting a value of the service garages and the lube center of $3,643,208. So now we go to the George's Restaurant. So the actual rent he's paying per square foot is $23. With the recoveries of $575, he's paying a semi-gross rent of $28.75 per square foot. The property expenses on the property, $8.91 square foot, comes out to a rent of $19.84. It's almost $20 a square foot. Expenses, I'm not using any expenses because they've been covered. So basically the potential income is $42,859. 4% vacancy, and using the shortfall at $9. We're using a cap rate 6%, which is what the department is using. You get a total value of $672,776. So the garage is at $3,643. The restaurant is $672,000. Comes up to a total of $4,316,000. That's rounded. And if you go down to page 12, 13, 14, and 15, especially 15, you'll see the rents and the property recoveries, and you'll see which ones are owner occupied, and you'll see property taxes are included, insurance, management, waste and snow and maintenance are all included. Each tenant pays his own hydro, heat and water. And like I said, there are recoverables at $5.75 a square foot, but he does not recover $3.16 per square foot of expenses. Go down to page 15. Those are all the expenses for the property, including some renovations. So the actual expenses are $532.01. The INE adjusted is $182.78 that I adjusted. So the capital cost renovations are basically, when you take it all into account, comes out to $349,923. So if you amortize those capital renovations over 30 years, you're getting $11,664 per year over 30 years. And just let me look here. And actually that capital cost, I could have included. I don't see that I did include it, but I could have included another expense of $11,664.10 per year for all the capital costs that were invested in the building that the assessor does have some permits for. Just give me 1 sec, please. Oh, I did include the capital costs, sorry, in my page 9. I included that capital cost, $11,664, part of the expenses. So basically that's $11,664 is amortized over 30 years for those capital costs, which is allowable in valuation. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Mr. Dayton, questions for the applicant?
Just a few. I guess my questions carry on from the other ones regarding the comparables, but regarding the comparables as well, is there any comparables that have all the services such as the subject property?
Any comparables that would have all the services of the subject property?
Yeah, so
meaning?
like lube, tune, auto repair, transmission, a rent-a-car, even a car wash and a restaurant on it, I guess.
Well, there's not really a car wash for the public. It's a car wash that's basically the owner uses because he details cars.
Okay, take that one out. Then the rest of the.
Well, this is what they call an auto mall. So there's just multiple buildings on it. I mean, there's no comparables. I don't know. Well, I guess I know there's places on McPhillips that have multiple on one premise, but no, I don't know of any comparable that would have everything on one site.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to figure out a couple other things here. Sorry, where is it now? Page 8 indicates net rents for these properties at $16. So is that the actual net rents for these properties?
If you look at page 8, it says on the top there, adjusted net rent, and on the left, it says actual net rent. So those are adjusted from the comparables.
Okay, so those are the rents that they are paying then?
Under which column?
Under net rent, actual net rent. So that's what they're actually paying, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and then is it safe to say then on page 10, the actual rent for George's Burgers is $23 a square foot, the net rent?
Yes, they're actually paying
Okay.
$23 a square foot. Plus they pay $5.75 per square foot, as do all the auto shops for
Right.
recovery.
So then how come you didn't use the actual rent, like, and then you grossed it up and then brought it back to a net rent, I guess? Is that what happened?
Could you ask that question again, please?
How come you didn't use this actual net rent then for your calculations?
Well, because that's where it starts. They have an actual net rent, and as you know, by definition that I've supplied in my brief on page 6, a net rent basically has a single net rent. Tenant pays rent, utilities, and taxes or insurance. Property owner pays structural repairs, property maintenance, and property taxes or insurance. So the property owner does pay some expenses under a net lease. That's why the department, you guys always use 3% for expenses. So
Right.
basically what I did with George's and the other properties is they're paying a net rent of $23. They're paying another $5.75 for recoveries to pay for the operating costs of the property. So they're paying a semi-gross lease of $28.75. And why it's a semi-gross is because they don't recover all the property expenses. And if you go back to page 9, you'll see that basically unrecoverable expenses that the owner pays for is $3.16 per square foot.
Right, but to find the potential income, we use the net rent that they pay, and then we take off 3% for non-recoverables, correct? Like I'm just not understanding.
If you come up with a net rent, but a net rent, basically you're using 3% for expenses. Well, that's not the case on most properties at 3% are expenses. For this property is actually a semi-gross lease. Like they're paying for rent and then they're paying for expenses. So if you add it all up on one line, they're paying 21. I've come up with an adjusted figure of they're paying $21.75 a square foot semi-gross rent. So not only are they paying the net rent, like they're paying for other expenses too, but they're not covering all the expenses of the property. I mean, you should know appraisal methodology, that there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing here.
I do, and we use net. You're saying that those are net rents. You're grossing up and then bring it back to another net rent using hypothetical expenses for the total subject property, correct?
I'm not using hypothetical expenses. If you look in the income and expense mailer, that's what they're paying. They're paying $575.
No,
I'll answer your question.
Yeah,
let's go down to page 13.
This isn't answering my question, though.
Okay,
Well,
let
I'm
him
going to
just
answer your
go
question
through.
right now.
Hopefully we'll have some clarity.
Okay.
Okay, so if you look at page 13 to answer your question, this is the income and expense questionnaire that the department provides online for the owner to fill out. And as you'll see, annual income received on the left, it says first is owner occupied part, it says income type, gross. Then you keep going down and it says rental income, well, 175,504, 171,504. Then it goes on the bottom, it says miscellaneous income specified. It says general recoveries, administrative recoveries, property tax recoveries. So that's been filled out, what the general recoveries are, property tax recoveries, to get a total income of $295,284. Then you go to the next page and you get insurance, property taxes, or management, I adjusted, professional fees, I adjusted. And you take all those expenses and you come down and it's got capital cost allowance for the roof. And from that, you get a net operating income after you take all the income from recoverables, the income from the rents, which are net rents, and then you deduct all the expenses to come up with a net operating income. And that's exactly what I did. Is exactly what the department wants and how this is filled out. So if you're using this income and expense questionnaire, you're basically getting you're getting the same result.
Okay, I mean, I guess I'll just touch on it one more time. We use actual net rents to calculate the potential income, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And then going to your page 9, you're using these expenses for the total property, all the buildings, all the land, and everything, correct?
that's correct.
So is it safe to say it's hard to determine what expenses exactly equate to, say, George's Burgers opposed to the Louvre building?
Well, it's just the total expenses for the property. I mean,
But we don't
the
know.
property, yeah, but the property is valued as one entity. We're not valuing each building individually. If we're doing that, then yes, it's probably good to know which building got the exterior replaced, which building got the roof replaced, but that's not the case. This is one total property where all the buildings are added up and there's one value. So to say that building 2 got new windows and building 5 got new doors, it doesn't really matter because it's basically one property. It's one property. It's valued as one property as a whole.
But then you're breaking it down into a per square foot rate and then taking it off of that net rent then, or that gross rent, I guess, that you grossed up.
I valued it on the whole property for expenses because George's is not a service garage. So I can't use the same
Right.
parameters on George as the basically on the service garage. So that's why I went over the whole property and basically divided the service garages as one entity and basically George's as another entity. So that's how I came up with that.
But that's kind of
Which
my
I think
point.
is reasonable.
The expenses are total of all these properties, George's, the services, like they might be using more hydro, they might have more land for snow removal. We don't know. We can't just use a blanket square foot rate and take it off the total to determine a net rent. Can we?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Page 8, do you know where this mezzanine space is?
The mezzanine space is basically it's in building 2, and it's small spaces above the office in those locations in Canon Auto, Miracle Dent, and Super Transmission. They're just small spaces that add up to 900 square feet.
Do you know why there's a size discrepancy between my information and yours? I'm just more curious.
Yeah, the size discrepancy comes from basically 4 or 5 assessment cycles where I've provided the same information year after year, and you guys just don't change it.
Okay, is it based on the mailer information?
Yeah, it's based on the income and expense mailer. I mean, you can see in end of 2022, all the numbers are there.
Right, but even looking at some of these, they don't seem to line up. Okay, I'm just gonna leave
well,
that.
I've come up. Okay, well, I've come up with more square footage than you have.
No, I was just curious where the discrepancy was. I guess, sorry, going back to the rents for the vehicle service garage, you indicate that the total net rent is $318,253, correct? And then the total size of, so I'm just trying to figure out how you came to 1326 exactly.
$1326 for the rent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I went over that on page 9.
Right, but the potential, you're saying that the net rent is 318,253, and if you do quick math here, 318,253 divided by the square footage 19,387 equals 1641 a square foot. So I'm just trying to understand where the difference is here.
What number are you going from?
The total net rent, 318,253.
Well, that 318,253
Mhm.
is for basically all the service garages.
Right.
And then the George's restaurant is separate.
Right. And that's why I'm wondering how you got 318,253 divided by the square footage is 1641. So I'm just wondering how the rent on page 10 is showing 1326.
Well, because the expenses haven't been deducted over that. That's the adjusted rent. The recoveries, if you add that in with the recoveries, then you're getting 2175 a square foot. 318,253 is just the basic net rent. But then you have to add in the recoveries that they pay, which gets a gross rent of 2175. And then you have to actually deduct the expenses. So if you go to page 9, you'll see that's the calculation.
So, but using the same methodology with the Georges, when she just subtracted 891 a square foot, how can?
Okay, let me go through this from the top because you're having a hard time finding how this calculation is working.
Yeah, it's quite confusing.
Well, it's actually quite straightforward. So page 8, you'll see you've got basically the adjusted rents at $16 based on my market comparables. So I've raised some. So based on those adjusted rents, you're getting a total value of $318,253. That's just the rent. But you have to subtract to come down to an actual NOI, net operating income rent, because if you look and the workup on page 10, is I don't use any expenses. It's zero. You're using 3% expenses. The expenses on this property are higher, so I use zero on my expenses. So basically, you go back to page 8, we're getting a net rent of $318,253, which has, by definition, has costs included. And that definition is on page 6. And that basically the tenant gets some things paid for by the owner. It says right there on page 6, tenant pays rent, utilities and taxes or insurance. Property owner pays structural repairs, property maintenance, and property taxes or insurance. So under a net lease, there are costs the property owner pays that are not recovered. That's by definition. So now you come down to page 8. So we've got the net rent is $318,253. Okay, so what expenses are the property owner paying and what expenses do the tenants pay? Well, the tenants are paying $575 a square foot. So you go down to page 9 and you'll see there's 2022 column, 2022 column adjusted. So I adjusted the insurance, I lowered it, I lowered the professional fees, and I lowered the waste and snow removal. So you're getting $191,942. So the total expenses per square foot are $8.91. So basically, now you're getting some highlighted garage air expenses. Well, 19,387 square feet, it's 172,701. Now, out of those expenses, how much does the owner get back in recoveries? He gets $111,475. So there's a difference there that he doesn't recover. And that's the definition of a net lease. And a net lease, there's some expenses that are not recovered by the owner by definition. That's why you guys use 3%. So we come to the basically net. So then under that, you'll see that unrecoverable expenses are $3.16 per square foot. The net rent from the chart above, adjusting to $16, is $318,253. The general recoveries at $575 a square foot, which is just above that, is $111,475. So the total gross rent, or total semi-gross rent, which it is, comes out to $429,728. $429,728. Now above that, you'll see that the general area, the general expenses for that property basically come out to 191,942. The garage expenses just for the garage is 172,701. So below that, you'll see there's net rent, general recoveries, total gross rent, less the expenses comes to a net operating income of 257,027, an NOI. So you go down to now the calculation. I'm using the net operating income, and that's $13.26 a square foot.
Mhm.
Then you subtract vacancy at 2% because the property has seen vacancy from above. Shortfall on that vacancy is minimal at 2,326. I have no expenses on here because I've accounted for the expenses. So then you get the net income of 249,560. You cap that, you get 3,643,208. Does that make it a little clear for you?
Not really, but I guess we'll just move on then.
Any more questions, Mr. Deitchen?
I guess, sorry, then quickly looking at it, then you're saying 891 a square foot times 2160 is $19,254 expenses. So you're saying the expense ratio is like 47% for this property for George's?
40% on the unrecoverable expenses are $3.16.
But you're saying the property expenses for George is $891 a square foot times 2160 is
That's what,
1,000.
and on page 9, you'll see that the total expenses for the property is $8.91 a square foot. At the very bottom there, right-hand column, you count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines. Total is 191,942 for the whole property. So the operating expenses for the whole property is $8.91, of which $5.75 is recovered to the owner, $3.60 is not recovered. So you go down to George's, he's paying $23 net rent, including some non-recoverable expenses to the owner. Recoverable expenses are $5.75 for total semi-gross rent of $28.75, less the total expenses of the property is $8.91 to come down to $19.84. It's all mathematics. I've added in the recoverable expenses, so they're basically paying $28.75 a square foot gross. That's what they're paying. $23 plus $5.75 a square foot. They're paying $28.75 total gross rent. Now the expenses for the property are $8.91 less $28.75. You get $19.84 is the rent they're paying, actually paying, and the owner is not recovering $3.16. So basically, the owner's stuck with $3.16 a square foot, non-recoverable, which, according to the definition on page 6, states that the owner on a net lease does pay for structural repairs, property maintenance, and property taxes or insurance.
Okay, no other questions.
Thank you very much. Ms. Del Oro, questions?
I have no questions, thank you.
Mr. Whitbread?
So I looked at it a little bit simpler. I looked at your net rent of $318,253 divided by the square feet, and I got $16.42 as I call it a gross rent, maybe. And then I took away the non-recoverables of $326, and that gave me the $13.26 that you have. Is that a different way to do it than what you've described in many, many, many words?
No, $13.26 is what they're actually paying.
Yeah, so that's came to the same number using that simple approach. I don't know if that helps you or not, Clayton, but it's what I arrived at when I tried to figure this out yesterday.
Well, I think the mathematics is, I hope I've laid it out clear enough.
Well, Apparently not. Anyway, I have no further questions.
Thank you. I have no questions either. Mr. Rack, you do have rebuttal evidence that you'd like to bring forward for this property also?
Correct, please.
Thank you. Mr. Deitchen, do you have questions on the rebuttal?
Oh, is it the same one?
Yeah,
Oh, no, no further questions on that.
thank you. Mr. Whitbread,
No further questions.
Ms. Del Oro?
Nothing further, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions. So Mr. Deitchen, do you have summation on this property?
No, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Rack?
Yes. So on all the properties, the assessor's using basically, I mean, he's using 5 rents on all these properties. And out of the 5 rents, one is at $16, which I'm using. Now you've got St. Anne's Road, which we know is an owner occupied because all basically Mr. Lubes are owner occupied. And at 3185, that seems excessive. You've got Vermilion and Lakewood are in a shopping mall. They're at 21 and 22. You're going to pay a higher rent than a shopping mall. You've seen that on 1010 Arlington, there's a lot more service garages rents available. I'm using, for this property, I'm using 2 rents right on Pembina Highway. It is my opinion that basically the assessors picked out of the computer, and he didn't even pick these, he's using what other assessors have used to basically defend that extremely high rent that the computer has come up with. I mean, the computer came up with a 4.6% cap rate on one property, which is ridiculous. So I think I've provided enough comparable properties. You know, I'm using 10 properties compared to the assessor's 5, and one of them agrees with me. So I think I've supplied more than enough evidence to show that that computer value in the $20 range is not indicative market overall. And there are many more, like on the last go around, this assessor provided and different companies like Colliers and sorry, I'm just looking this up, that have supplied up to, I had a total of about 38 different service garages. So there's many, many service garages one could pick to analyze the rent.
Is this new
of
evidence?
these types of property.
This is his summation.
So I've provided enough information, and basically more than the assessor has, I think more accurate, and I'm requesting that the values I'm asking for be considered and the reductions in the properties considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes item number 8. And with that, we have heard all of the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you, Mr.
Thank
Deitchen,
you.
Mr. Rack, for your presentations today.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
good
you,
weekend.
Jen.
And go Bombers.
Yes.